You know, there is a distinct difference between taking a test and truly understanding a test.
Oh, absolutely.
Most people just spend months cramming facts into their heads, like dates, names, articles.
Hoping they stick long enough to bubble in the right circle.
Exactly. But today, we are doing something totally different. We aren't just reviewing the GPSC 2026 prelims. We're dissecting it.
Yeah, treating the first 55 questions of this paper as a crime scene.
Right. We're looking for the fingerprints of the examiner.
That is the perfect way to frame it, because an exam like the GPSC, it isn't just a knowledge audit, it's a psychological game. The examiner is actively trying to mislead you. They want to trigger your biases and, see if you can maintain clarity under pressure.
We have the question paper, we have the answer key, but what really matters today is the why.
Right, the mechanics behind it.
Like, why was this specific option a trap? Why was that question a sitter? So we're calling this paper decoding. We've got a massive stack of source material here, the raw question paper, the answer keys, and some really detailed strategic analysis notes.
And our mission for this deep dive is to reverse engineer the logic needed to actually clear this exam.
We're going to break this down into segments: culture, polity, economy, geography, science, and a little bit of math.
It's going to be a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, funny.
We are covering 55 questions, but the goal isn't just to give you the answers. I mean, you can find those online in 5 seconds.
Yeah, anyone can Google an answer key.
Exactly. The goal is to give you the heuristic, that mental shortcut that helps you solve the next question you haven't even seen yet.
We'll be looking at the core concept, the trap analysis, and the elimination logic for every single one of these.
So if you are ready to get inside the mind of the person who set this paper, let's jump right in.
Let's start with the soul of the state. Segment 1 is culture and heritage.
Ah, yes.
Looking at the analysis of this first block of questions, I'm just struck by how hyper-local it feels.
It really is.
It's not just who built this temple. It's how do people in rural Gujarat actually live?
That's what I call the identity trap. The examiner wants to know if your knowledge is purely academic or if it's actually rooted in the culture.
Right.
Look at question 1. It asks about the utility of the intoni.
Yeah?
Now, if you're just studying from a generic national textbook, you might completely miss this.
The options make it seem like it could be for covering dustbins or, like, cooling milk.
Right, but anyone who has spent time in a village or even just watched old Gujarati cinema knows the visual.
It's that ring, usually made of cloth or coconut fiber.
Exactly. The ring that rests on a woman's head to support the water pot, the gado.
So it's a purely functional tool for stability.
Form follows function. The options about churning butter or cooling milk, those are just distractors based on associated rural imagery.
Because they know you associate village with dairy.
You hit the nail on the head. They give you dairy-based options to lure you in. But this is a purity test. Do you know the specific tool?
If you do, it's a sitter. Free marks.
And if you don't, you are guessing against the house. The elimination logic is simple here. A ring shape is for support, not for cooling.
Speaking of guessing, let's look at question 8. The Modhera Sun Temple.
The heavy artillery of Gujarat's architecture.
Solanki era.
The Maru Gujar style. This question is, it's a beautiful example of how they layer facts to hide a lie.
The question asks you to verify statements. Like, was it built by Bhimdeva first?
Yeah, that's standard history.
Does the first ray of the sun illuminate the sanctum at the equinox?
Yes, that's the engineering marvel of Matera.
But then there is the third option. It suggests the original idol of the sun god is still present in the sanctum.
And that right there is the trap.
It appeals to our sense of romanticism.
Exactly. We want the monument to be whole. We want the history to be untouched.
But the brutal reality of history involves invasions, looting.
Right. The temple is a monument today, not an active site of worship with the original deity intact. The idol is missing.
So the examiner is testing if your emotional attachment to the heritage overrides your objective historical knowledge.
It's a sentiment trap. You have to be cold and clinical. The idol isn't there. End of story.
Okay, let's move to the soundscape of the state. Questions 15 and 46. These deal with musical instruments.
This is all about unique identifiers. Question 15 is about bhavai, the folk theater form.
The options list things like the Ektaro, Pakwaj, Shanai.
But bhavai has a very specific sonic signature. It is the bumgal.
That incredibly long copper pipe. It has such a distinct, haunting, trumpet-like sound.
You can hear it from miles away. It was literally used to announce the start of the play to the surrounding villages.
So bhavai equals bumgal.
If you know that one link, you don't need to worry about the other options. And then question 46 expands on this by asking you to pair instruments with traditions.
They contrast the classical with the folk. It lists tabla and shinai versus dowel and nagaru.
Tabla feels very formal, very indoor.
Right.
Tabla and shinai belong to the margi or classical tradition. They require formal training. A guru.
Whereas duels and nagaru.
That is the Desi tradition. That is the heartbeat of the village square. It's communal.
The question asks for the traditional folk pair.
Yeah, so if you pick tabla, you're confusing the court with the village. The core concept is knowing the context of the performance.
Temple or court versus village square. That distinction seems to run through a lot of these culture questions.
It does.
Look at the dances in questions 22 and 30, Garba and Garbi. I think a lot of outsiders, and honestly even some locals, use those terms interchangeably.
They do, but grammatically and culturally, they are completely distinct. Question 22 hits this hard.
How so?
Well, Garba is grammatically associated with the feminine. It links to Shakti worship, the perforated pot symbolizing the womb and the universe.
So it's traditionally performed by women.
Yes. Garbi, on the other hand, is often associated with male performers and is linked to the worship of Krishna or Dashama.
So if you see a statement saying Garbi is exclusively performed by women, you know it's a trap, it's false.
Correct. And then question 30 adds this fascinating layer about the origins of dance.
Right, because we usually think dance comes from ritual or celebration.
But the Tippani dance comes from labor.
Tippani is the tool, right?
Yeah.
The long stick with a block at the end used to beat the floor.
Yes. Women laborers, while beating the lime floor to make it smooth, created a rhythm to make the work bearable.
And that rhythm became the dance.
The question asks which dance is named after an instrument or tool. It's Tippani.
It's a beautiful example of how work transforms into art.
The elimination strategy here is purely linguistic. Tippani is literally the name of the hammer-like tool.
I love that. It grounds the culture in reality. It's sweat and labor, not just costumes.
Exactly.
Now, questions 38 and 53 regarding folk songs. This is where I think the examiner really tried to pull a fast one with Fatana.
Oh, question 53 is my absolute favorite bouncer in this section.
A bouncer.
Yeah, it asks about the nature of Fatana songs. One of the options tries to link them to Narsin Mehta, the great saint poet.
But Narsin Mehta is the gold standard for devotion. Vaishnav Yanto, the morning hymns, the Prabhatiya.
Exactly. Narsin Mehta equals bhakti. Absolute pure devotion.
But Fatana.
Fatana are sung during weddings, specifically by the bride's side to roast the groom's side.
They are insults.
They're witty, mocking, humorous songs.
So claiming Narsin Mehta wrote Fatana is like saying a heavy metal band wrote a lullaby.
It's a complete genre mismatch. If you know the tone of Narsin Mehta is reverent and spiritual, and the tone of Fatana is cheeky and satirical,
you can eliminate that option instantly.
You don't need to know every song in the Gujarati canon. You just need to match the vibe.
Let's wrap up the culture segment with geography. Questions 35 and 43 deal with tribes, specifically the cities.
This feels like a map question disguised as a culture question.
It really does. The question tries to pair the city community with the Kutch region.
Now, are there cities in Kutch? Yes, there is a scattered population. But the question implies dominance or a cultural heartland.
Where is the soul of the city culture in Gujarat?
It's in Saurashtra, the Gir Forest. Jambur village.
Gir Somnath. That is where you find the Damal dance, the distinct cultural preservation.
Exactly. If you map them primarily to Kutch, you are ignoring their true hub. The examiner is testing dominance versus mere presence.
You have to have a mental map of the state's demography.
The trap analysis here is that students will think, oh, I heard there are cities in Kutch, so this must be true.
But in a matching question, you look for the best fit, not just a possible fit.
Right. Specificity is key.
So the takeaway for culture is specificity. Know the specific tool, the specific sound, the specific geography, and don't let romanticism blur the facts.
And always spot the tonal mismatch. Devotion doesn't mix with satire.
All right, let's leave the village square and enter the parliament. Segment 2, polity and governance.
This is usually where the language gets dense.
Article this, amendment that.
It can be dry, but this is also where the elimination strategy is most potent. Polity questions are logic puzzles.
Governed by rules.
And those rules have very specific boundaries. The examiner loves to push past those boundaries to see if you notice. We call this the extreme word trap.
I see this in question 47 regarding the basic structure doctrine. This is a very complex legal concept, But the trap in the question is surprisingly clumsy.
It is. One of the statements claims that the basic structure principle implies that every constitutional amendment must be first approved by foreign institutions.
I mean, just say that out loud. Approved by foreign institutions.
It sounds ridiculous because it is. India is a sovereign republic.
The very definition of sovereignty is that we don't answer to external powers for our internal laws.
You don't need to know the Kesavananda Bharati case inside out to know that the UN or the World Bank doesn't get to veto our amendments.
As soon as you see foreign institutions, you slash that option.
It's a logic check.
It's almost like they are checking if you're awake.
Exactly.
What about question 54? That deals with cooperative federalism and financial relations. This feels a bit more nuanced.
It is, but the extreme word rule still applies. Look at the options. Option 1 says states can levy all major taxes without involving the center.
Okay.
Option 3 says the center can completely deny any financial support to states.
Without involving and completely deny. Those are absolutes.
And in a federal democracy, absolutes are incredibly rare, especially after the GST regime. We have the GST Council. Decisions are shared.
A state cannot just go rogue and tax whatever it wants.
And the center cannot just starve a state to death financially. The Constitution provides for the Finance Commission to ensure distribution.
So the moderate option, the one that speaks of shared power or councils, is almost always the right one.
That's a great heuristic. If it sounds like a dictatorship or anarchy, it's probably wrong.
Let's look at question 2 about state reorganization. This is about redrawing the map of India.
Article 3. The question asks about the power of Parliament versus the power of the state legislature.
And the trap is the consent theory.
We intuitively feel that if Parliament wants to change the boundary of Gujarat, they must ask Gujarat, and Gujarat must agree.
It's our land, right? It feels democratic.
But the Constitution is unitary in this spirit. Parliament is supreme regarding territory.
The president must refer the bill to the state legislature for their views. Right?
Yes, but Parliament is not bound by those views. They can ask for your opinion and then completely ignore it.
If you assume the state has a veto power, you walk right into the trap.
The core concept here is that India is an indestructible union of destructible states.
That's a crucial distinction. Consultation, not consent.
Right.
What about the power dynamics in questions 9 and 31?
Question 31 is another extreme word, victim. It suggests the central government in India is merely symbolic with no real power.
That's laughable.
Wait.
We have one of the strongest centers in the federal world.
Exactly. Instant elimination. But question 9 is more academic. It asks for the definition of the parliamentary system.
Students often get confused with direct election of the PM or a written constitution.
But the core definition is about accountability. The executive, the ministers, is responsible to the legislature, the parliament.
That's collective responsibility. If the House loses confidence, the government falls.
That is the heartbeat of our system. If you know that one sentence, executive is responsible to legislature, you solve the question.
It's about knowing the primary definition versus the secondary features.
Precisely.
Let's talk about rights. Questions 16 and 23. Fundamental rights versus directive principles, the DPSPs. It's the classic cage match.
Question 16 establishes that the courts can void laws that violate fundamental rights. That's Article 13, judicial review.
But question 23 tries to trick you regarding the DPSPs.
It might suggest that because DPSPs are fundamental to governance, they automatically override fundamental rights.
Could they?
Generally, no. The Manuva Mills case settled this. There is a harmonious construction.
You cannot destroy fundamental rights just to implement a directive principle.
The trap is thinking that social good, the DPSP, always trumps individual rights, the FR. The Constitution balances them.
So the option that says one always overrides the other is incorrect.
Exactly.
We have a current affairs question in the polity section too. Question 37 regarding the Women's Reservation Bill.
The Nari Shakti Bandhan Adhiniyam. Everyone knows it passed, it's big news. But the question asks about the implementation timeline.
The trap option says it applies to all elections immediately after 2024.
Which is what people want to hear.
But the law has fine print.
It says implementation depends on the publication of the next census and the subsequent delimitation exercise. It's conditional.
The examiner exploits your optimism. You have to read the conditionality clauses in new laws.
So for polity, watch for the absolutes. Foreign institutions, symbolic center, completely deny.
And remember, Parliament is usually supreme, and the timeline is usually in the fine print.
Don't let your political wishes override the actual text of the Constitution.
Okay, let's move to segment 3. Economy, development, and data. I always find this section tricky because numbers change every day.
And the examiner knows that. That's why good questions focus on concepts that don't change, or data trends that are unmistakable.
They aren't asking for the price of gold on a random Tuesday.
Right. Take question 4. It asks for the definition of inflation.
We hear the word every day. Inflation is up.
But what does it mean? The options will list things like price rise in food items or price rise in fuel.
But the economic definition is a sustained increase in the general price level.
It's not just onions, it's the whole basket. If you pick the option that limits it to one sector, you are wrong.
And question 52 ties this to the Monetary Policy Committee, the MPC. We talked about shared power in polity. Does that apply here?
Absolutely. The trap here is about the RBI governor's power. Option 3 claims the governor can set interest rates independently if he disagrees with the committee.
But it's a committee of 6 people.
Right. 3 from the RBI, 3 from the government. They vote.
The governor has a casting vote only in the event of a tie.
He cannot just overrule the committee because he feels like it. It's a democratic institution. If you understand the structure of the MPC, you know the dictator-governor option is false.
Let's look at the agency swap in question 29. The Human Development Index, HDI.
This is a classic move. The statement says the HDI is a flagship report published annually by the World Bank.
It sounds plausible. The World Bank publishes tons of data.
It does. But HDI is the baby of the UNDP, the United Nations Development Program.
It was conceptualized by Mahbubul Haq and Amartya Sen.
It's distinct from the World Bank's economic focus. If you know your reports, you spot the agency swap immediately.
It's like saying a fierce cricket match was organized by FIFA. Wrong body.
Exactly.
What about question 14 regarding growth projections? This feels like a reality check.
The statement suggests India has sustained 9 to 11% growth in all recent IMF assessments.
11%. That sounds like China in the early 2000s.
Exactly. India is doing well. We are the fastest growing major economy, but our range is typically 6 to 7, maybe touching 8% in a boom quarter.
Consistently hitting double digits like 11%. That is hyperbole.
The examiner is testing your sense of scale. You don't need to know if it was 6.8 or 6.9%, but you need to know it definitely wasn't 11.
Let's look at the why is it there. Questions. Question 50 about steel plants. Vilay versus Vizag.
This is economic geography. Industries don't just appear randomly. Vilay was set up in the 1950s. Why?
Because it's right next to the iron ore and coal belts of central India. It's raw material oriented.
And Vizag is on the coast.
Vizag is the Rashtriya Ispat Nigam. It is a shore-based plant.
Its logic is completely different. It's positioned for export potential and importing high-grade coal if needed. It's port or market oriented.
The question asks you to distinguish the locational factors. If you treat them as the same, you miss the economic logic.
Right.
One last one on economy. Question 26 on subsidies and the WTO.
The colored boxes. Amber, green, blue. The question focuses on trade-distorting subsidies,
The trap usually claims the WTO bans all subsidies.
which would destroy agriculture globally. The WTO allows green box subsidies, things like research, pest control, infrastructure, because they don't distort trade.
They only penalize the amber box, direct price support that messes up the global market prices.
You need to know that nuance. It's not a blanket ban. It's a targeted restriction.
So for economy,
Hmm.
know your agencies, like UNDP versus World Bank. Understand the mechanism, like voting in the MPC, and have a realistic sense of the numbers. No 11% growth.
And understand the why of location. Geography drives economy.
Which brings us perfectly to segment 4, Geography and Environment, the Science of Earth.
This section is all about busting myths. Question 5 is the big one. It asks about the cause of seasons on Earth.
I think if you stopped 100 people on the street, 90 would say it's because the Earth gets closer to the sun in summer and farther in winter.
The perihelion and aphelion, it makes intuitive sense. Closer fire, more heat.
But here's the logic flaw. When it is summer in India, the northern hemisphere, the Earth is actually near its farthest point from the sun, aphelion.
And when it is winter here, we are closest.
So the distance theory is actually the opposite of what we experience.
Exactly. Plus, if distance were the cause, the whole planet would have summer at the same time.
But we know Australia has winter when we have summer. So distance is out.
So it has to be the tilt.
The 23.5-degree axial tilt.
This tilt changes the angle of sunlight. Direct overhead rays mean summer. Slanted rays mean winter.
The question tests if you know the physics of the tilt or if you're relying on the distance myth.
That's a crucial correction.
What about question 12 regarding western disturbances? This is very relevant for Gujarat and North India.
These are the winter storms. The question tests the origin and the impact. The trap might say they originate in the Bay of Bengal.
But they come from the west, hence the name.
Right. They originate in the Mediterranean Sea. They are carried by the jet streams, those high-altitude winds, all the way across the Middle East to hit the Himalayas.
They are vital for the rabi crops, the wheat.
If you don't get Western disturbances, you don't get a good wheat harvest. You need to visualize that journey on the map. Mediterranean to jet stream to Himalayas to wheat.
Let's look at connectivity. Question 45 deals with the trilateral highway.
India, Myanmar, Thailand. This is the physical manifestation of the Act East policy.
The question might ask about the purpose. It's not just a road.
It's a strategic trade corridor to bypass the maritime choke points and integrate with the ASEAN market. It connects Mora and Manipur to Mae Sot in Thailand.
And question 34 touches on the future, critical minerals and the EV transition.
This links geography to geopolitics. Lithium, cobalt, nickel. The statement might say India is completely self-sufficient in these minerals.
Which is the extreme word trap again.
Yeah.
We know we are hunting for lithium in Argentina and Australia because we don't have enough.
Exactly. We are heavily import dependent. Kabul was set up specifically to buy assets abroad.
If you claim self-sufficiency, you're ignoring the strategic reality of why we are pushing for recycling and foreign acquisition.
So geography isn't just where is the mountain, it's how does the mountain affect the rain, and where do we get the stuff to build batteries?
It is dynamic. It is a system.
Moving on to segment 5, science and technology. You called this applied logic.
I did, because none of these questions require a PhD. They require you to look at the world around you and ask why.
Look at question 6, rear view mirrors. Every driver uses one.
Objects in the mirror are closer than they appear.
Why? Because it's a convex mirror, it curves outward.
A plane mirror shows you the real size, but it has a narrow field of view. You would only see the grille of the truck behind you.
A convex mirror shrinks the image. By making everything smaller, it squeezes more of the road into that small piece of glass.
It trades size for field of view.
Exactly. The question asks for the type of mirror. If you understand the need, I need to see the whole road, you derive the answer. Convex.
Then there's question 36, the classic bird on the wire. Why don't they get shocked?
This trips people up. One option usually says the bird's feet are insulators.
But birds are made of meat and blood. They conduct electricity just like we do.
Exactly. If that bird touched the live wire and the neutral wire at the same time, it would be fried chicken.
The reason it survives on one wire is a concept called potential difference.
Voltage drop. Current flows like water, from high to low.
If the bird is sitting on a wire carrying 11,000 volts, the bird's left foot is at 11,000 volts, and its right foot is at 11,000 volts.
The difference is zero. There is no hill for the current to flow down. It ignores the bird.
So it's not that the bird is special, it's that the circuit isn't complete.
Precisely. It's a circuit problem.
Let's look at question 20 regarding farming. Acidic soil.
A farmer notices his soil is acidic. What does he add? This is basic chemistry. Acid plus base equals neutral. You need a base.
So lime.
Calcium oxide or lime, it is alkaline. If you added gypsum, that's usually for alkaline or salty soil.
If you added fertilizer, you might make it worse. You need the chemical opposite to balance the pH.
And question 28 explains why soap is useless in hard water.
Hard water contains calcium and magnesium ions.
When soap meets them, it reacts to form a white, sticky precipitate we call scum. It doesn't foam, it just curdles.
That's why we use detergents.
Detergents have a different chemical structure, sulfonate, that doesn't react with calcium to form scum. They stay soluble.
The question asks for the chemical reason for the failure of soap. It is the formation of insoluble precipitate.
Let's do the calculation question. Question 13, the geyser bill. This is where the non-math students panic.
But they really shouldn't. It is simple multiplication.
Step 1, how much power? 2 kilowatts.
Step 2, how long? 2 hours a day.
So 2 times 2 is 4. You use 4 units or kilowatts per day.
Okay, 4 units a day.
Step 3, for how long? A month. 30 days. 4 units times 30 days is 120 units total.
Step 4, how much does a unit cost?
6 rupees.
120 units times 6 rupees, 12 times 6 is 72. So 720 rupees.
When you break it down like that, it's literally primary school math. But the paragraph format scares people.
Fear is the enemy, not the math. One last science deep dive. Question 51. High altitude. Why do we get dizzy in the mountains?
Hypoxia. The air pressure drops, so you get less oxygen per breath. The question asks what happens at the cellular level.
Your body needs energy. ATP. Usually it uses oxygen to make lots of ATP. Aerobic respiration.
But there isn't enough oxygen.
So the body switches to plan B. Anaerobic respiration. It burns glucose without oxygen.
This is inefficient. You get very little energy, and it produces a byproduct, lactic acid.
Which causes the cramps and fatigue.
Right. The trap might say respiration stops. It doesn't stop. It just shifts gears to a less efficient, dirtier mode.
That energy deficit causes the dizziness.
So science is about mechanisms. Why does the mirror work? Why does the bird survive? Why does the body crash?
Science is just common sense quantified.
We are entering the home stretch, segment 6, the quant and reasoning speed round. We won't solve all of them, but let's talk strategy.
Speed is key. Question 3 is averages for cricket scores. Question 10 is percentages for population growth.
The strategy here is don't be a hero. You don't need to do the full calculation to the last decimal.
Estimation.
Yes. If the population grows at 5% and the starting number is 6 lakhs, 10% is 60,000. So 5% is 30,000. Add that.
If the options are spread out, estimation wins.
Question 48 is a visual one. Which word cannot be made from capitalization?
This is a hunter question. You just hunt for the missing letter.
If the option is bold E, you look for a B. No B in capitalization. Done. Answer marked.
These are free marks given to those who are observant.
And question 55 is an arithmetic progression. Ruby savings. 500, 800, 1100.
The gap is 300. It's a linear series. You need to find when she hits 8,000.
You can use the formula, or you can just look at the gap and estimate. I need to cover 7,500 rupees at 300 a jump. It's about 25 jumps. Look for the option near 25.
The takeaway for quant is don't get stuck in the mud. Estimate, observe, and move on.
Correct.
We have dissected the paper, we've looked at the traps, the myths, and the math. Now let's zoom out. Segment 7, post-game analysis.
What is the pattern declassification here?
I see 3 massive takeaways for the 2026 aspirant. First is subject weightage. Polity and geography are the heavy hitters.
And notice they are conceptual. You cannot rote learn the basic structure or the mechanism of seasons. You have to understand the machinery.
It's comprehension over memorization.
Second is the difficulty mix. The paper gives you sitters like the impony or the convex mirror. You must hit 100% accuracy on these.
You cannot afford to lose marks on the easy stuff.
Then there are the bouncers, like the specific Narsim meta versus Fatana distinction. You can afford to skip those or take a calculated risk, but don't let them destroy your confidence.
And third,
the trap architecture. The extreme word heuristic we discussed. Completely, without exception, foreign institutions.
this is your biggest weapon in polity and economy. The examiner uses these words to create false statements.
If you train your eye to spot the extreme, you can eliminate half of the wrong answers instantly.
It really does seem like half the battle is just spotting the lie in the options rather than knowing the truth perfectly.
It is. The examiner knows you are stressed. They know you will read Madhara Sun Temple and assume idle.
They know you'll read seasons and assume distance.
You have to pause. You have to ask, is this a trap?
So to you, the listener, here is your strategy blueprint. 1. Scan for sitters. Get the easy points first.
2. Apply the extreme word filter. If it screams always or never, kill it.
3. Contextualize. Put yourself on the map. Where are the cities? Where's the Western disturbance coming from?
And 4. Focus on the why. Why does soap fail? Why is Parliament supreme? If you understand the principle, you can answer any variation of the question.
This has been a massive decoding session. 55 questions stripped down to their absolute logic.
It shows that the exam is beatable. It's not magic, it's logic.
It's not magic, it's logic. I love that. We've covered everything from the water pots of rural Gujarat to the high-voltage wires of physics.
To the listener, take these lessons, the specific eliminations, the extreme word alerts, the map visualizations, and apply them to your next practice paper.
Don't just solve it, decode it.
And remember, the exam isn't testing what you know, it's testing how you think under pressure.
Are you reading the question, or are you reading your assumption of the question?
That is the provocative thought for the day.
Check your assumptions at the door. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the examiner's mind. Good luck with your prep.
Goodbye, and good luck. Welcome back to the deep dive. We are really just getting right back into the thick of it today.
We absolutely are.
Yeah. So we are continuing our marathon decoding of the GPSC 2026 prelims paper. If you were with us for part 1, we dissected those first 55 questions. We laid the foundation, looked at the early trends. But today we are venturing into what I kind of like to call the danger zone.
The danger zone, I like that.
Yeah. We're tackling questions 56 through 101 based on these incredibly detailed notes from Gaurav Chauhan. And reading through these, it really feels like the air gets thinner in the second half of the paper.
Oh, it does. And honestly, calling it the danger zone isn't just dramatic flair. From a psychological perspective, it is entirely accurate.
Because it just feels heavier.
Exactly. What happens in the exam hall, specifically in competitive exams like the GPSC, is that this second half introduces a very tangible hurdle. We call it the fatigue factor.
Let's break that down for listeners before we even look at a single question. The fatigue factor. Is it just about getting sleepy, or is there something more mechanical happening in the brain?
It is decision fatigue, pure and simple. Think about the cognitive load you're carrying. You have just spent over an hour answering 55 high-stakes questions.
Right.
Your brain has been firing on all cylinders. You're analyzing, recalling facts, eliminating options, second-guessing yourself. So by the time you hit question 56, your glucose levels are dropping.
We're just drained.
Your mental stamina takes a huge hit. You start reading faster, maybe skimming the lines, but you're actually absorbing a lot less information.
And I assume the examiner, the person actually setting this paper, they know this is happening to you.
Oh, they count on it.
Yeah.
They absolutely count on it. This is exactly where they start planting what we call silken traps.
Silken traps.
Yeah, these are questions that look incredibly simple on the surface. They
Yeah.
feel soft to the touch, very easy to read, but they require a level of conceptual clarity that a tired brain will just skip right over.
So they rely on your complacency.
Precisely. They want you to rush. So our mission today isn't just about giving you the answer key. I mean, anyone can go online and download a PDF of the answers. We are here for something much deeper.
Examiner mindset analysis.
Exactly that. We want to train your elimination skills. That way, when your brain is tired, your training just automatically takes over. It becomes like muscle memory for an athlete.
Which is exactly what we need. And we have a massive spread today. We're looking at economy, international relations, science, and some really tricky logic puzzles that act as a total mental gym.
Pattern intelligence is the ultimate goal here.
So let's not waste any more mental energy. Let's just jump right into the deep end. We are starting at the top of section 1 for today, looking at the economy and international trade. Question 56.
Right. Question 56 deals with RTAs, regional trade agreements.
Okay, so the question gives us 3 statements. First, that RTAs are treaties to facilitate free trade. Second, that the number of RTAs has decreased in recent years. And third, that under the WTO framework, RTAs are authorized subject to certain checks.
This is a textbook example of a trend analysis question. Let's look at statement 1. It is just a definition. RTAs are indeed about free trade areas, so that's standard.
Makes sense.
And statement 3 is a legal fact. The WTO does allow for these agreements under specific articles, like Article 24 of UATT. But the trap is sitting right there in statement 2.
The one that says RTAs have decreased in recent years. I mean, that sounds like a factual claim you would need hard data to verify.
And that is exactly where the examiner gets you. You do not need a spreadsheet for this. You just need to know the broader global economic narrative. If you follow global economics even passively, you know the WTO has been struggling for decades.
Right, the multilateral talks are always stalling.
The Doha round of negotiations is basically dead in the water. So because the big global deal isn't happening, what are individual countries doing?
They're making their own side deal.
Exactly. They are improvising. They're rushing to sign bilateral and regional agreements. The trend is skyrocketing, not decreasing. We are seeing more free trade agreements now than ever before, purely because the multilateral system is broken.
So the statement that they are decreasing is just factually opposite to global reality.
Yes. So simply knowing the macro trend allows you to eliminate statement 2. You cross that out, look at the options, and you are likely left with the correct answer instantly.
It's about sensing the direction of the wind, not memorizing numbers.
Exactly.
Okay, moving to question 59, the Paris Agreement. I feel like this is a staple topic. You just cannot go into a prelims without knowing this inside and out.
Climate change is arguably the single most important thematic area in modern exams right now.
So the question asks about nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. Statement 1 claims that these NDCs submitted by countries are legally binding.
Ah, the legally binding trap. This is one of the most common pitfalls when it comes to international relations questions. It sounds so authoritative, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, it's a treaty, it's the UN, so it feels like it must be binding.
And that is the logical assumption. If I sign a mortgage, I am bound to pay it. But in international law, and specifically the Paris Agreement architecture, it is entirely different.
How so?
The NDCs, which are the specific targets countries set for themselves to cut emissions, those are voluntary. The process of reporting them is binding. You must submit a plan, and you must update it every 5 years.
But if you miss the actual target in that plan?
There is no international climate police. No court is going to sanction a country for missing its NDC target. The whole system is built on naming and shaming. It relies on peer pressure and transparency, not legal enforcement.
That is such a crucial distinction. The process is binding, but the outcome is not.
Exactly. Now look at Statement 2. It talks about the obligation of developed countries to provide climate finance to developing nations for mitigation and adaptation.
Which is basically the core bargain of the Paris Agreement, right?
Yes. The idea being, we industrialized first, we messed up the climate, so we will help fund your transition. That part is central. So Statement 1 is the trap. Eliminate it.
I love how specific these word choices are. Let's look at question 63 regarding fiscal policy.
A fitter alert. This is a fundamental concept you shouldn't miss.
It asks for the definition and impact. Fiscal policy basically refers to the use of government spending and tax policies to influence economic conditions.
Right. You have to contrast this with monetary policy, which is the central bank handling interest rates. Fiscal is the government handling the budget. The question was straightforward, linking it to aggregate demand.
So if the government spends more, demand goes up. If they tax more, demand goes down.
Macroeconomics 101. If you got this wrong, it's a clear sign you need to revisit the basic textbooks.
Fair enough. Let's jump to question 64 because this one requires you to have a map in your head. It's about international trade routes. We have the Malacca Strait, Suez Canal, and Panama Canal.
I call this the geography map trap. It tests if you are actually visualizing the globe or if you're just memorizing lists of names.
So the option for the Panama Canal claims it is the primary route for trade with Africa.
Let's pause and visualize. Where exactly is Panama?
It's right between North and South America. It connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans.
Right. Now visualize the trade route from India to Africa, or from Europe to Africa, or China to Africa.
None of those go near the Americas.
Exactly. Why on earth would you travel all the way across the Pacific or Atlantic to the Americas, cross the Panama Canal just to get to Africa? It is geographically absurd.
But here's that fatigue factor again.
Yes. If you are rushing and you just see the words Panama Canal and trade route in the same sentence, your tired brain might just click yes because those concepts are associated.
You really have to force yourself to pause and visualize the map. Panama has zero relevance to the African trade corridor.
Immediate elimination.
Speaking of things that sound right but are technically wrong, let's look at question 66, the gig economy.
Very relevant topic right now. The Social Security Code 2020 really brought this into the spotlight.
The statement here claims the gig economy includes only digital platform work and entirely excludes offline service providers.
The word only is your massive red flag here. This is what the source notes call a bouncer.
Why a bouncer? Because of the app association.
Exactly. We immediately associate gig work with apps. Uber, Zomato, Swiggy. So digital platform sounds completely correct. But the legal definition of a gig worker is much broader.
It's about the contract type.
It is about the nature of the relationship. It is any work outside the traditional employer-employee relationship. Freelancers, consultants, and even temporary offline workers can fall under the gig umbrella depending on the specific legal framework.
So limiting it strictly to digital platforms is way too narrow.
The exclusion makes the statement false.
Got it. Let's move to question 94. This is about the National Monetization Pipeline, or the NMP.
A flagship government scheme. And this question was an absolute masterclass in the science of elimination.
Statement 1 says the NMP allows for private sector investment in both greenfield and brownfield projects.
Stop right there. That is the trap.
Let's define the terms for the listener. What is a brownfield asset?
A brownfield asset is something that already exists. A highway that is already built. A stadium that is already standing and operational. It has an existing revenue stream.
And greenfield would be building from scratch. New land, new construction.
Correct. And the entire philosophy of the National Monetization Pipeline is to unlock value from existing government assets. The government is essentially saying, we built this road, it is making money, now you pay us a lump sum to operate it for 20 years.
And they take that lump sum to build something else.
Exactly. It is strictly, and I mean strictly, for brownfield assets.
So just adding the word greenfield makes the whole statement false.
One single word destroys the entire option. If you miss that distinction, you get the question wrong. They are not monetizing future construction. This is a classic government scheme inclusions and exclusions pattern.
Always ask who is included and what is excluded. That is razor sharp. You really have to read every single word. Let's touch on question 80 regarding the Economic Survey 2024-25.
This one uses a psychological trick more than a factual one.
Statement 2 claims that India's forex reserves aren't enough to cover even 2 months of imports.
I call this the extreme negative statement. Just think about India's macro stability over the last decade.
We're usually pretty solid, right?
We pride ourselves on having robust forex reserves, usually covering 10, 11, sometimes even more months of imports. It is our buffer against global shocks.
So to say it covers less than 2 months
Implies we're in a crisis worse than 1991.
Right.
It implies a total collapse of the economy.
It paints a complete doomsday scenario.
Right. And unless you have been living under a rock, you know, India is not currently in a severe balance of payments crisis. The examiner is testing your basic situational awareness and confidence.
So you don't even need the exact number of months.
You don't. You just need to ask yourself, is India collapsing right now? No. Then the statement is demonstrably false.
Confidence is key here. Let's briefly look at question 70 on the budget 2025-26.
This one focused on MSME classification and tax slabs. The analysis required here was about the impact of tax reduction on middle-class consumption,
The logic being, lower tax means more disposable income.
which means higher consumption, which in turn boosts GDP. It is a virtuous cycle argument.
Simple enough. And question 83, the Global Innovation Index.
This tested WIPO's role, but the tricky part was a correlation question. It asked, does high innovation always mean the highest GDP per capita?
Always is a very strong word.
And usually a wrong one in these exams. While there is definitely a correlation, you have major outliers. You have countries that are incredibly rich due to oil, meaning high GDP, but they rank low on innovation.
And vice versa.
Exactly. Countries punching above their weight in innovation, but aren't the wealthiest yet. So the absolute link that always is a trap.
Question 87 was microeconomics, supply and demand.
A great scenario question. The scenario is supply increases more than demand increases.
So everyone wants the product, meaning demand is up, but the factory is making way, way more than people actually want, so supply is up even more.
Exactly. If supply completely outstrips demand, what happens to the price?
It crashes.
Correct. The price drops, but the total output or quantity in the market rises. It is just logical reasoning applied to a basic economic graph.
Finally, for the economy section, question 101, the Human Development Index, HDI.
Testing the 3 pillars: health, education, and standard of living.
The question asked for the specific indicators used for these pillars.
Life expectancy at birth for health, mean years and expected years of schooling for education, and GNI per capita for standard of living.
You just have to memorize these.
You do. The trap usually involves swapping GNI with GDP or trying to swap life expectancy with infant mortality rate. You have to know the exact metrics.
Okay, that wraps up the economy section. Let's switch gears. We are entering the lab now. Section 2, science, technology, and the environment.
This section was really interesting because it moved away from theoretical textbook science and went straight into applied science, the kind of science you can actually see in your kitchen or on your commute.
Like question 65. The pressure cooker question? I feel like this is something we see every single day, but actually explaining the physics of it is a different story.
It is classic applied physics. The underlying concept is the ideal gas law, PV equals nRT. But let's keep it practical. When you increase pressure in a fixed volume, what happens to the boiling point of water?
It goes up.
Exactly. In an open pot at sea level, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. You cannot get it hotter than that because it turns to steam and evaporates. But in a pressure cooker, you seal it and trap the steam,
So the pressure builds inside.
which raises the boiling point of water to around 120 degrees Celsius.
So the food is literally cooking at a much higher temperature.
Correct. Higher temperature equals faster chemical reactions, which equals faster cooking. That was statement 1. But then the question threw in a trap, claiming the cooker acts as an oxidative chamber that destroys vitamins.
Oxidative chamber. That sounds very scientific and plausible.
It does, but think about the actual mechanism.
Yes.
You put the lid on, you seal it tight, you are trapping steam inside.
Which means you're pushing out or excluding pressure.
Exactly. It is not an oxidative chamber because you are actively limiting oxygen flow. If anything, the high steam pressure helps hydrolyze the cellulose in the food faster.
Hydrolyze.
It basically breaks down the tough plant fibers. That is why the meat or the lentils get soft so quickly.
So the process is hydrolysis, not oxidation.
Correct. The oxidative option is a distractor. It relies on the candidate's vague general knowledge that cooking destroys nutrients, but the specific chemical mechanism described oxidation is wrong for a sealed environment.
Wow. Okay, let's look at question 73, green hydrogen.
The fuel of the future. The National Green Hydrogen Mission is a huge focus right now.
Statement 3 claims production is based only on coal gasification with carbon capture.
Look at the words carefully. Green hydrogen versus coal.
They seem contradictory right off the bat.
They are mutually exclusive. We use a color spectrum to classify hydrogen production. Brown hydrogen comes from coal. Gray hydrogen comes from natural gas. Blue hydrogen is natural gas, but with carbon capture added.
But green hydrogen.
By definition, green hydrogen must be produced using renewable energy like solar or wind to split water via electrolysis. If you see the word coal in a question about green hydrogen, it is automatically wrong.
Even if they add fancy terms like carbon capture.
Right, that might make it blue, but it will never make it green.
It's just color-coded logic. What about question 96? Biogas digesters.
Again, basic applied biology. Biogas production relies heavily on methanogens, which are bacteria that produce methane.
And the question asks for the condition inside the actual digester.
Methanogens are strictly anaerobic. That means they hate oxygen. They only function in the total absence of air.
So any option mentioning the presence of air or oxygen is out.
Immediately wrong. You do not need to know the complex chemical formula of biogas to know that it's an anaerobic process.
Let's do one more from the applied category. Question 72. Convex mirrors.
Objects in the mirror are closer than they appear.
Exactly. Rear view mirrors on cars.
That is the classic everyday application of a convex mirror, because it gives you a much wider field of view. The question asked where else they are commonly used.
One option was shop security domes.
Yes, those big bubbles you see up in the corners of convenience stores, they allow the cashier to see the whole aisle at once. That's a convex mirror.
But another option was solar furnaces.
That's the trap. Think about what a solar furnace does. You want to generate intense, concentrated heat. You need to focus sunlight to a single burning point.
And a convex mirror disperses light, right? It spreads it out.
Exactly. To focus light, you need a concave mirror. So a solar furnace is the odd one out. You eliminate it.
Question 82 was about optical fiber.
Communication tech. The core concept tested here was total internal reflection.
It was comparing it to traditional copper wire.
Optical fiber carries signals using light, not electricity. That means it is completely immune to electromagnetic interference.
So things like lightning, radio waves, or power lines, they don't mess up the signal.
That is the massive advantage it has over copper, and that's what the question was targeting.
Let's jump to question 57. Critical minerals, specifically lithium.
For the new oil, as they call it.
The question mentions the lithium triangle,
which is a standard static geography fact. It's in South America, Chile, Argentina, Bolivia. They hold the world's largest known reserves.
And it connects this to recent discoveries right here in India.
Specifically, the discoveries in the Riyazi district in Jammu and Kashmir. This is a brilliant example of how the examiner blends static geography with current affairs. Both statements were correct. They're checking if you know where the resources are because that dictates the geopolitics of the next century.
Question 58 was about hormones and stress.
The classic fight-or-flight response.
Adrenaline.
Yes. Adrenaline raises your heart rate, dilates your airways. It prepares your body to literally run from a tiger. The question tried to confuse this function with insulin.
Which is for regulating blood sugar.
Exactly. Just knowing the primary distinct function of each hormone solves the question easily.
And finally for science, question 89. Blood transfusion compatibility.
I love this one. It's a logic puzzle perfectly disguised as biology.
It asks, who can donate to whom?
You have to know the ABO system and the RH factor. O negative is your universal donor. AB positive is your universal recipient. The question gave specific pairs like O positive giving to AB positive.
Is that a valid pair?
Yes, it is. O can give to AB, positive can give to positive. But another option said a negative giving to O positive.
Which doesn't work.
Right. A cannot give to O under any circumstances. You just have to run the check step by step for each pair.
Moving on to section 3, history, culture, and specifically Gujarat specifics.
The GPSC loves testing local nuance. This is usually where outside candidates stumble the hardest.
Let's start with question 84, Dholavira, the Harappan city, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
A major pride point for Gujarat.
Statement 3 mentions Dholavira had a dockyard.
We are back to the map trap, but this time it's applied to history. When you think dockyard in the context of the Indus Valley civilization, which city comes to mind instantly?
Lothal, always Lothal.
Lothal. Lothal is connected to the Sabarmati River and the Gulf of Kampat. It was the functional port city. Dholavira, on the other hand, is located in the Rann of Kutch. It is world famous for its intricate water management system.
The reservoirs and dams.
Yes, channels built to catch and store scarce rainwater. It is not a port city in the same way Lothal was.
So mixing up Dullavira and Lothal is the intentional trick.
It is the oldest trick in the examiner's book. If you see the words dockyard and Dullavira in the same sentence, that is a glaring red flag. Eliminate it immediately.
Let's look at question 60, pilgrimage traditions. The Padyatra.
The foot pilgrimage.
Yeah.
A very deep, intrinsic part of Gujarati culture.
The question lists Pavagad, Ambaji, Dakor, and Somnath. It asks which of these are famous for this specific tradition.
This is a pure test of local cultural immersion. Pavagad, Ambaji, and Dakor are incredibly famous for their specific Padyatra traditions. For example, Ambaji involves massive crowds walking specifically during the Padarvi Purnima. Dakor has the walk on every Purnima.
And Somnath.
Somnath is a massive, historically significant temple. It's a Jyotirlinga. People absolutely do walk there. But it isn't primarily defined by the Padyatra tradition in the same specific cultural context as the others. The Padyatra is the core cultural identity of the pilgrimage for Ambaji and Dakor, in a way it just isn't for Somnath.
So it's about identifying the primary identity. That's very subtle.
All about the nuance. You have to know the living culture, not just a static list of temples from a book.
Question 74 deals with Jolly work, the architecture.
The Siddhi Sedni Jolly, probably the most famous architectural symbol of Ahmedabad.
The question asks about the material used. Wood versus stone.
The statement implies the Jolly work itself was traditionally carved from wood. But the most intricate and famous Jollies of Gujarat, like at Siddhi Said, are actually stone carvings.
But they look just like delicate lace or wood.
That is the absolute genius of the artisans. They took patterns that were traditionally used in wooden architecture and somehow translated them into solid stone. They made stone look as delicate as wood. The concept is the synthesis of styles. But the physical material in these famous examples is stone.
Let's touch on question 67, the Yagna tradition.
Ancient Indian culture. This tested the philosophy behind the ritual.
So it's not just about burning wood in a fire.
No, not at all. It's about purification. It's about how the chanted mantras affect the mind. The symbolism of burning the ego in the fire. The question tested the philosophical underpinning, not just the mechanical steps of the ritual.
Question 91, Mauryan versus Achaemenid pillars.
Art history. Comparing ancient Indian and Persian art styles.
So the distinction lies in the stone itself, right?
Yes. Mauryan pillars are monolithic. They're carved from a single, massive piece of stone. Achaemenid, or Persian pillars, are segmented. They are built as smaller pieces stacked on top of each other. Recognizing that structural difference is the key elimination point for the question.
Question 98, sculpture schools.
Mathura versus Gandhara versus Sarnath.
How do you easily tell them apart for the exam?
Gandhara has a heavy Greek influence. Think Apollo-like faces, wavy hair, very defined muscles. Mathura is indigenous, usually using spotted red sandstone. Sarnath, which developed later during the Gupta period, is known for the wet drapery look.
The transparent clothes.
Exactly, transparent clothing and a very deep spiritual calmness on the face. The question simply asks you to identify the school based on a list of these features.
Let's move over to section 4, polity and international bodies. This is where things get really conceptual. Question 75, substantive equality.
This is a beautiful question. It's not just checking if you memorized an article number, it's checking if you actually understand the soul of the Constitution.
It contrasts formal equality with substantive equality. Explain that difference for us.
Formal equality is the idea that everyone is treated exactly the same. Blind justice. Imagine I give a very tall person and a very short person the exact same size box to stand on so they can see over a fence.
Right.
That is formal equality. I treated them identically.
But the short person still might not be able to see over the fence.
Exactly. The identical treatment didn't solve the underlying disparity. Substantive equality acknowledges that everyone isn't starting from the same place due to historic injustice, discrimination, or systemic barriers.
So substantive equality is giving the short person a taller box.
Precisely. The correct option in the question highlights the concept that historic injustice cannot be fixed by formal equality alone. You need affirmative action, or special provisions, to actually level the playing field. That is substantive equality. If you treat fundamentally unequal people equally, the result is just more inequality.
That connects directly to question 68 about social justice.
Yes, it does. The Constitution balances the no discrimination principle of Article 15 with the special provisions of Article 15, Clause 4 and 16, Clause 4. It is not a contradiction in the document. It is the specific mechanism designed to achieve substantive equality.
Now, question 90. We touched on this in the intro, the UN Population Fund report.
Right. Statement 3 claimed the data provided in the report is legally binding.
And we know from our earlier discussion that's false.
UN reports are advisory in nature. They provide data. They provide recommendations and guidelines. They are not laws. No sovereign country is legally forced to change its domestic population policy just because of a UNFPA report. That is the international law logic you need to apply to almost every single UN-related question.
Unless it's the Security Council.
Exactly. Unless it's a specific binding Security Council resolution, it is rarely binding.
Speaking of the Security Council, question 97 covers the UNSC.
The P5 and the veto power.
And it mentioned Germany's bid.
Germany is part of the G4. That's Brazil, Germany, India, and Japan. And they're all actively lobbying for permanent seats. The statement acknowledges Germany's ambition. This question is a great mix of static structure, knowing who currently holds the veto and current geopolitical maneuvering.
Question 92, UN peacekeeping.
India's role here is historic. We are consistently one of the largest troop contributors in the world.
The core principles tested were consent, impartiality, and non-use of force.
Except in self-defense, of course. The question tested your understanding of these specific principles. If an option says peacekeepers can attack proactively or intervene without host nation consent, that's wrong. Their posture is defensive and authorized.
Question 99, Article 32.
The absolute heart and soul of the Constitution. The right to constitutional remedies.
The power to issue writs.
Habeas corpus, mandamus, certiorari, prohibition, quo warranto. The question compared the Supreme Court's power under Article 32 with the High Court's power under Article 226.
And the High Court's power is actually broader, right?
Yes, it is. High courts can issue writs for any other purpose, not just for the violation of fundamental rights. The Supreme Court's original jurisdiction under Article 32 is limited specifically to fundamental rights. That counterintuitive fact that the lower court actually has the broader jurisdiction in this one specific aspect is a favorite trap for examiners.
Question 85. Sources of the Constitution. We borrowed features from everywhere.
A patchwork quilt or a beautiful bouquet of flowers, depending on how generous you want to be in your description.
So, joint sitting.
Borrowed from Australia.
Procedure established by law.
Japan.
Cabinet system.
The UK. It's the classic Westminster model.
The trap here is usually just swapping them around, right? Like saying joint sitting came from Canada.
Exactly. You just have to memorize these pairs. There is no deeper logic to derive here. It's just pure factual recall. But the trick is, the examiner will often pair a feature with a country that sounds plausible contextually. You have to know the specific lineage.
Question 61, the 73rd Amendment.
Panchayati Raj, local self-government.
Testing the core identity.
Accountability to the community through the Gram Sabha, the mandatory three-tier system. The powers listed in the 11th schedule. The question essentially tested if you knew the difference between the obligatory provisions things states must do and voluntary provisions things states can choose to do.
All right, take a deep breath. We are entering the mental gym now. Section 5. Math, reasoning, and logic.
This is the section that makes or breaks your final score.
Why do you say that? Because in general studies, if you know it, you know it.
Because in general studies, there's almost always a hint of ambiguity. You're thinking, is this statement interpreted this way or that way? But in math, the answer is the answer. If you solve the logic, you get the marks. It is 100% accuracy territory. It acts as a vital buffer for the calculated risks you have to take in the GS section.
Let's look at question 86, the coding and decoding problem. It says, if 15 times 3 equals 9, 60 times 4 equals 48, and 75 times 2 equals 30, find 10 times 4.
At first glance, your brain just screams the math is wrong. 15 times 3 is 45, not 9. So you have to find the hidden operation behind the symbols.
So what's the pattern here?
Look at the actual result. 15 times 3 is 45. The given answer is 9. How do you get from 45 down to 9?
You divide by 5.
Okay, let's test that hypothesis on the next one. 60 times 4 is 240. Divide 240 by 5. What do you get?
48.
And that matches the question perfectly. Let's double check the third one just to be sure. 75 times 2 is 150. Divide by 5.
30.
The pattern holds. The rule is multiply the numbers, then divide the result by 5. So for the final question, 10 times 4.
That's 40. Divide by 5, the answer is 8.
Simple arithmetic hidden behind a mask. Once you spot the divide by 5 rule, the question takes 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But if you panic because the math looks wrong initially, you'll stare at it for 10 minutes and lose precious time.
I really love that aha moment. Let's talk about questions 76 through 79, the seating arrangement.
I call this the cluster question. You have 6 friends, Dipti, Prakash, Kinjal, Nimit, Kartik, and Chetna, all sitting in a circle.
People often skip these entirely because the paragraph just looks so long and intimidating.
That is a massive strategic mistake. Yes, it might take you 2 full minutes to solve the initial puzzle, but once you solve it, you get 4 questions right instantly. It is an incredibly high return on your time investment.
The key is drawing the circle right away.
Draw the circle. Mark the 6 spots evenly. Start with the most concrete information you have. If the question says Kinjal and Chetna are adjacent, draw them in. Then it says Dipti is between Prakash and Kinjal. Place them. Once you lock in 2 or 3 positions relative to each other, the rest of the names just fill in automatically. Never ever try to do this purely in your head. Paper and pen are mandatory for seating arrangements.
Visualizing is key. Speaking of visualization, question 93, the direction tests.
Rohit moves south, then turns right.
If you are facing south and you turn right, which way are you facing?
West. And this is exactly where people mess up under pressure. They imagine their own right hand while physically looking at the paper. But if you are facing south on the map, your right is the map's west.
That orientation flip is the trap.
Always draw a little compass next to your diagram. North, south, east, west. Literally turn your paper upside down on the desk if you have to, just to align your own perspective with Rohit's. Do not lose easy marks on a simple left-right confusion.
Let's briefly touch on question 62, Venn diagrams.
40 students total, economics and statistics.
24 like econ, 3 like both. How many like only stats?
The critical word here is only. The 24 who like econ include the 3 who like both. So how many are strict economics lovers?
24 minus 3, so 21.
Right. Now we know there are 40 students total. We have 21 strict econ. We have 3 who like both. That's 24 people accounted for.
So the remaining people must be the only stats group. 40 minus 24 equals 16.
Venn diagrams are just visual subtraction. Don't let the overlapping circles confuse you. Just systematically subtract the overlap from the total categories.
Question 81. Match the following. Minerals to industries.
A classic geography matrix question.
Bauxite connects to.
Aluminum. It is the primary ore.
Limestone connects to.
Cement. The essential raw material for it.
Mica connects to.
Electrical industries. Because it acts as an excellent insulator.
If you know even one of these pairs confidently, usually you can eliminate 2 entire options from the answer key immediately.
Exactly. It's about leveraging partial knowledge.
Question 100. Odd one out.
Square, triangle, cylinder, rectangle.
This is just about dimensions, isn't it?
Square, triangle, and rectangle are all 2D shapes. They are flat. A cylinder is 3D. It has volume. It is the glaring odd one out. Very easy marks if you don't overthink it and look for some complex mathematical formula.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've decoded the questions, spotted the traps, and solved the puzzles. Now let's pull it all together. Section 6, full paper integration.
When you look at part 1 and part 2 together, a very clear picture emerges of the examiner's mindset. The paper is moving away from static, rote facts, and heavily toward applied concepts.
We saw that clearly with the pressure cooker question and the NMP question. It's no longer just what is NMP, but how does NMP actually work in practice?
Exactly. And the recurring themes are undeniable. Economy has a huge weightage. The budget, the survey, the gig economy. Environment is prominent, green hydrogen, climate finance. And logic is your absolute safety net.
Let's talk about that advanced strategy, handling the statement-based questions. We saw a technique you highlighted today called the one wrong option technique.
This is your most powerful weapon in the exam hall. In question 94, the word greenfield was the one wrong option. In question 84, dockyard was the one wrong option. In question 73, coal was the one wrong option.
And in a multi-statement question, finding that one definitively false statement often eliminates 2 or 3 of the given options instantly.
It creates a domino effect. You don't even need to know if statement 2 is true. If you know for a fact statement 1 is false, and options A, C, and D all contain statement 1, well, congratulations, you just found out the answer is B without even reading it.
That is the elimination skill training we talked about at the top of the show.
It is exactly how you manage negative marking. You do not guess blindly. You guess when you have confidently eliminated at least 2 options. That forms your intelligent guessing matrix.
So if you can kill 2 options, you must attempt the question.
Statistically, yes. If you eliminate 2, you have a 50% chance. Over the course of the entire paper, the probability works in your favor and will yield positive marks. But if you are purely guessing out of 4 options, do not do it. That is how you rack up negative marks and sink your score.
And what about managing the fatigue factor we discussed?
You have to recognize it happening in real time. When you hit question 80 and feel your eyes glazing over, stop. Take a sip of water. Stretch your neck. Remind yourself, the examiner thinks I'm tired right now. I am going to prove them wrong. That split-second mental reset can save you from making the West versus East mistake or the greenfield versus brownfield oversight.
We've distilled this down to some really critical lessons today, based on Gaurav Chauhan's notes. Let's rapid-fire the top takeaways for the listeners before we wrap up.
Lesson 1. Geography is about visualizing maps, not memorizing lists. Visualize the Panama Canal, don't just read the words.
2. Science is applied. Understand why the food cooks faster, not just that it does.
3. Government schemes are all about the fine print. Look for inclusions and exclusions. Brownfield versus greenfield.
4. History is about differentiation. Do not confuse the features of D'Oliveira with Lothal.
5. In international relations, the exact words matter immensely. Binding versus voluntary. That one distinction is worth multiple marks.
And finally, logic is about trusting the process. Draw the circle, draw the compass, find the mathematical pattern.
Absolutely. Ultimately, the exam is a test of your nerves just as much as your knowledge. Part 2 proved that if you stay calm, manage your energy, and use logic, even the scariest bouncers become playable deliveries.
Playable deliveries. I really like that cricket analogy to wrap things up. Listeners, this has been an intense deep dive into the examiner's mind. We hope you feel a little more armor-plated for the next time you face a paper like this.
Keep practicing that elimination technique on mock papers. It really is a muscle. You have to exercise it constantly.
A huge thank you to our expert for decoding the matrix today. And if you want to keep building this pattern intelligence, make sure you subscribe to the Gaurav for India YouTube channel. For our final thought, next time you read a current affairs article, don't just ask what happened. Ask yourself, how would an examiner turn this into a trap? Keep decoding, keep learning. This was The Deep Dive. Catch you next time.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. It is Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. And if you are listening to this right now, take a deep breath.
Yeah, take a very deep breath. You've earned it.
Seriously. You have likely survived the first 2 legs of our absolute marathon analysis of the GPSC 2026 prelims. We've analyzed the first 100 questions, we've torn apart the logic, and we've rebuilt the strategy from the ground up. But now
we enter what you like to call the kill zone.
The kill zone, exactly. It's a dramatic term, but honestly, it is entirely accurate. We are looking at the final leg of the paper to questions 102 through 152. And the thing you have to realize, the thing that most candidates completely forget, is that by the time you reach question 102 in the actual exam hall, you haven't just been solving problems.
Right, you've been sitting there for what, 2 hours?
2 hours of intense focus. You have been fighting your own biology. That is such a good point. The brain is literally frying at that point. The sugar levels are dropping, decision fatigue is heavily setting in. You start second-guessing things you actually know. You read the word as not, and your tired brain just sees is.
Precisely. And here's the secret. The examiner knows this. They know your cognitive discipline is slipping. That is exactly why they structure these final 50 questions the way they do.
So it's not even a test of knowledge anymore.
Not dearly, no. It's about what I call final layer performance optimization. It's an endurance test. It is about not letting your tired brain fall for a trap that a completely fresh brain would spot in 2 seconds.
Okay, so the mission today for our deep dive into these source materials is to maintain that high-precision elimination capability, even when the system just wants to shut down. We have a massive stack of sources here. We've got the raw question paper, the answer keys, and a really comprehensive strategic analysis on trap signals and examiner psychology.
We do. And we are going to decode the high-weightage blocks of environment and geography, the conceptual twists in polity, and the specific applied nature of the science questions this year. We aren't just giving you the answers. That's useless. We are deconstructing the mind of the person who wrote the question.
I love that. Let's dive straight in then. We are starting with section 1, which is environment and geography. Looking at the analysis notes, this block seems very heavy on concepts, but there are a few gifts in there too, right?
There are, and honestly, you need those gifts to keep your morale up in that final hour. Look at question 102. It asks, which marine ecosystem is known for its rich biodiversity and is often referred to as the rainforests of the sea?
Okay, let's look at the options here. We have A, coral reefs, B, mangroves, C, seagrass, and D, tidal flats. Now, to me, sitting here reading this, it feels suspiciously easy. Like, is it a trap? Am I overthinking it?
For once, no, you're not. It is what we call a sitter. The answer is a coral reefs. Just as rainforests on land host a massive percentage of terrestrial species, coral reefs, despite covering literally less than 1% of the ocean floor, they support about 25% of all marine life.
Wow, 25%. But wait, why does the examiner put a question this simple after 100 really tough ones? I mean, is it just to be nice?
It is entirely to reset your dopamine. It is completely psychological.
Really?
Yeah, think about it. If you get this wrong, you are out of the race purely due to carelessness or overthinking. But getting it right gives you this false sense of security right before they hit you with question 103.
Ah, the bait and switch.
Yeah.
Which brings us to question 103, the GPS technology question. And this one is definitely tricky. It asks, in which of the following situations can GPS signal reception be obstructed or accurate positioning be affected?
Right.
And the options are 1, between very tall buildings, 2, heavy overcast or cloudy weather, and 3, deep underground tunnels or parking spaces.
So this tests your understanding of the actual physics of radio waves. It isn't about using a smartphone. It is about line of sight propagation.
Let's break it down. Statement 1 is tall buildings. I assume this is true. I mean, everyone has lost Google Maps in the middle of a dense city.
Absolutely. In technical terms, it is known as the urban canyon effect. If you are standing in Manhattan or a really dense part of Mumbai, the satellite signal bounces off the glass and concrete before it hits your receiver.
Like an echo.
Exactly like an echo. That is called multipath error. It confuses the receiver about the timing of the signal, so your position on the map jumps around wildly.
Okay, that makes total sense. Now, statement 3 is deep underground tunnels.
That one should be highly intuitive. GPS signals are relatively weak radio waves coming from 20,000 kilometers up in space. They simply cannot penetrate kilometers of solid rock and soil. If you are in a deep tunnel, you have zero signal. So statement 3 is definitely correct.
Here's where I think people really stumble, though. Statement 2 says heavy overcast or cloudy weather. My gut reaction as a user is to say no, because my Maps app works perfectly fine when it rains. So I would probably eliminate this.
And if you did that, you would walk right into the examiner's trap.
Because of the wording.
Look closely at the question. It asks if it can be affected or obstructed. It doesn't ask if it stops working entirely. While GPS frequencies, the L-band, are designed to pass through clouds, heavy storm clouds, a highly charged atmosphere, or ionospheric disturbances, they do attenuate the signal.
Attenuate, meaning they weaken it.
They weaken it, yes. It degrades the accuracy. It might not kill the signal completely like a concrete tunnel does, but it definitely affects the positioning. The examiner is actively testing scientific accuracy against your casual, everyday user experience. If you rely on just your common sense without knowing the underlying science, you lose the mark.
That is such a crucial distinction. Works perfectly versus is mathematically effective. So the answer is 1, 2, and 3, all of them.
Correct. All 3 affect the signal.
Man, that is a subtle trap. All right, moving on to question 110. We are looking up at the sky. It asks about the changes in the color of the sky and the reasons behind them. This feels like high school physics, but applied to real life.
It is. It's Rayleigh scattering. This is literally a concept you learn in 10th grade physics, but the test is, can you apply it under extreme exam pressure?
Let's see. Statement 1 says, the sky looks deep blue after rain because suspended particles are removed, making Rayleigh scattering more effective.
That is completely correct. Normally, all the dust and pollution in the air scatter all wavelengths of light somewhat equally, which makes the sky look sort of hazy or whitish. That is called MIE scattering.
MIE scattering, right?
Yes. But when rain washes all that junk out of the atmosphere, you are left with pure air molecules. And those molecules scatter the shorter blue wavelengths much more efficiently than the red ones. Hence, you get that deep, gorgeous blue sky after a storm.
Okay, statement 2 is the tricky one then. It says, at sunset, red light is scattered more than blue light by large dust particles, which is why we see a red sunset.
Watch the phrasing there. It is false.
Why? The sky is red at sunset.
It is red, but not because red is scattered more. At sunset, the sun is low on the horizon, so the light has to travel a much longer path through the atmosphere to reach your eye. During that long journey, all the blue light gets scattered away completely in other directions.
Oh, I see.
The red light, which has a longer wavelength, passes straight through with less scattering.
So it isn't that red is scattered more, it is that red is the only thing surviving the long journey to your eye.
Exactly. The statement completely flips the physics. It sounds really plausible if you were reading it fast at the end of a 2-hour paper, but the physics is backward.
Wow. And statement 3. If there were no atmosphere, the sky would appear completely black.
That is your logical anchor for this question. No atmosphere means absolutely no particles to scatter any light. If light isn't being scattered toward your eye from the sides, you see nothing. You would just see the sun as a blindingly bright star in a pitch-black void, exactly like the photos taken on the moon.
So the correct answer relies completely on spotting that inversion in the sunset logic. Red isn't scattered more, it's scattered less.
Yes, it is a test of careful reading comprehension just as much as it is a test of physics.
That's brutal. Okay, let's talk about solar energy. Question 111 is about the International Solar Alliance, or the ISA. I feel like I know this one, but the source notes explicitly say there is a massive time trap here.
It is the evolution of membership trap. It is incredibly common in current affairs questions.
Okay, statement 1 says it was launched by India and France to collect solar energy in tropical regions. That is the origin story from the Paris Agreement in 2015. We know that is true.
Correct. That's a foundational fact. But look at statement 2. It says membership is limited only to countries located between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn.
There is that magic word, only.
Only is almost always a red flag in these exams. When the ISA started, yes, it was strictly for the sunshine countries between the tropics. But a few years ago, they amended the framework agreement. Now, all UN member states are eligible to join regardless of their geography.
So if you studied this, say, 3 years ago, and you just never updated your notes,
you confidently fail the question. The examiner is checking if your knowledge is static or dynamic. They want to know if you're keeping up. So statement 2 is false.
And statement 3 says the headquarters is in India.
That is true. It is in Gurugram. So the correct answer is 1 and 3 only.
Let's jump over to biology. Question 124. This is about the difference between respiration and photosynthesis.
Ah, the classic plants don't breathe in the day myth. This is a brilliant conceptual trap.
Statement 1 says respiration in plants continues continuously during the day and night.
And that is biologically correct. Plants are living organisms. They need energy 24/7 to maintain their cells. They don't just stop metabolizing because the sun goes down or comes up.
But statement 3 says, in respiration, plants release carbon dioxide and use oxygen, which is the opposite of photosynthesis.
Also correct. Photosynthesis takes in CO2 and releases oxygen. Respiration takes in oxygen and releases CO2.
I think people get confused because since we were kids, we've been told plants give us oxygen during the day, so we assume they aren't using any.
Right. During the day, photosynthesis is happening at such a massive scale it completely overpowers respiration. The net output is oxygen, but the underlying process of respiration making sugar for energy is still quietly happening in the background. If you think plants literally stop respiring during the day, you fall for the trap.
Let's look at question 146 regarding the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This seems like a global governance question.
This is what we call an authority trap. It tests if you actually know the legal limits of these international bodies.
Statement 3 claims the IPCC is a policy-making body that is authorized to enforce compliance with climate treaties.
That is visibly false if you understand how the United Nations system works.
Yeah.
The IPCC is strictly a scientific body. It collates research. It writes massive assessment reports. It does not make policy whatsoever. And it definitely cannot enforce anything on a sovereign nation. It doesn't have an army or economic sanctions at its disposal.
So it provides the medical diagnosis, but it doesn't write the law.
Exactly. It explicitly describes itself in its mandate as policy neutral and never policy prescriptive. You can eliminate statement 3 immediately just based on that keyword enforce.
Before we leave the geography block, let's look at question 144. Rock systems in India. Our source material classifies this one as a strict bouncer.
It is a bouncer because it requires pure rote memorization of geological history. There's very little logic to save you here. You have to match the rock system to the mineral it produces.
The pairs given are 1 Darwar system with iron ore, gold, and manganese, 2 Gondwana system with coal, and 3 Cuddapah system with petroleum. Let's start with Darwar. That's easy if you know the Kolar gold fields, right?
Yes, Darwar is the most economically important rock system in India for hard metals. Gold, iron, manganese, that matches perfectly. Gondwana is also a classic match for anyone who has studied Indian geography. 98% of India's coal comes from Gondwana rocks.
Okay, what about the third one, Cuddapah and petroleum?
Cuddapah rocks are very old sedimentary rocks, mostly sandstone and limestone. They are meant for building materials. They're way too old and have been cooked under pressure too much to hold petroleum. Petroleum is almost exclusively found in the tertiary system, much younger rocks where the trapped organic matter hasn't been destroyed by tectonic heat. So pair 3 is completely wrong.
Got it. All right, let's shift gears entirely. Section 2 is polity and constitution. This block is described in our notes as highly conceptual.
Polity in recent years has really evolved. It moved away from the old style of, which article is this? to a much deeper what is the intent of the law.
Take question 106. It talks about the separation of powers. Statement 1 mentions the NJAC as a mechanism where executive and judiciary interact. We know that history. But Statement 2 is the kicker here. It simply says the Supreme Court can make laws.
Can they?
Well, on paper, Parliament makes laws, the legislature.
Yeah.
But what about case law?
That is exactly the nuance the examiner is playing with. Under Article 141, the law declared by the Supreme Court is binding on all courts within the territory of India. And when there's a complete legal vacuum, like the famous Vishaka guidelines for sexual harassment in the workplace, the court's verdict acts as the law until Parliament finally steps in to pass an act.
So saying they make laws is technically the legislature's job, but practically speaking.
Practically, they do legislate from the bench in very exceptional circumstances. However, in a strict, constitutional, multiple-choice question, usually the formal separation of powers is respected. If the statement implies the SE has formal legislative power, it's false. If it says their verdicts have the force of law, it's true. It depends heavily on the specific phrasing, but generally the judiciary interprets it doesn't make law.
Let's move to something with even higher stakes. Emergency provisions. Question 120.
Article 352, the national emergency.
Statement 1 says, during a national emergency article, 19 rights are automatically suspended and the president can suspend the right to move court for other fundamental rights, except Article 20 and 21.
Except 20 and 21. That is the golden rule. It was introduced by the 44th Amendment right after the 1975 emergency. You can never, ever suspend Article 20, which is protection against arbitrary conviction, and Article 21, the right to life. Even if the country is at war, the government cannot arbitrarily kill you or jail you without due process.
Statement 3, however, talks about the financial emergency under Article 360. It says the maximum tenure is 3 years.
Trap. A massive trap.
Why? 3 years sounds reasonable.
Financial emergency has absolutely no maximum period defined anywhere in the Constitution. Once it is approved by Parliament, it continues indefinitely until the president specifically revokes it. The examiner knows that you have memorized the 3-year limit for president's rule under Article 356, and they're hoping you'll crosswire the data in your tired brain.
Yeah, it is incredibly nasty. Mixing up the timelines of 2 completely different emergencies.
It is a detail trap. You have to keep your constitutional silos strictly separate.
Question 113, the Vice President. The question asks, why is the VP the ex officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha? This asks for the logic, not a fact.
Right. The option suggests some wild things, like to control the Rajya Sabha on behalf of the government or to weaken the Lok Sabha's power.
But the answer is about neutrality, isn't it?
Yes, it is option D. To provide a neutral umpire without direct political competition. The framers were heavily influenced by the American model here. The VP has almost no major executive function. To give the office some dignity and to ensure the upper house, which represents the states, isn't presided over by someone deep in the daily political mudslinging of the lower house, they put the VP there, it ensures dignified neutrality.
Question 127 is about the right to property. This is a fascinating journey through time from 1950 to 1978.
Statement 2 is the one to watch closely here. It says, after being removed from Part 3 by the 44th Amendment, the right to property was completely abolished from the Constitution and has no legal validity today.
Completely abolished, no legal validity. Those are huge extreme red flags.
And they are false flags. It wasn't abolished, it was just moved to Article 300A in Part 12. It is now a constitutional right or a legal right. That means the state can still take your property, but only by authority of law. They can't just grab it arbitrarily via an executive order. They have to follow a strict legal process and usually compensate you. So it definitely still has legal validity. Statement 2 is unequivocally false.
Question 148 brings us to the holy grail of Indian polity, which is the basic structure doctrine.
You simply cannot walk into this exam without intimately understanding the Kesavananda Harati case and the Minerva Mills case.
Statement 3 here says, the provision added by the 42nd Amendment, which completely prohibited judicial review of amendments, was supported by the Supreme Court in the Minerva Mills case.
This is a classic fact reversal trap.
Yeah.
The 42nd Amendment, which was passed during the emergency, tried to forcefully say no court can ever question a constitutional amendment. In 1980, in the Minerva Mills case, the Supreme Court aggressively struck that down. They didn't support it. They said judicial review is a core part of the basic structure, and Parliament cannot take it away.
So if a candidate just memorizes the case name, Minerva Mills, but forgets the actual verdict, they fail the question.
Exactly. You need to know the outcome, not just the title of the case.
Rounding out the polity section, we have question 141 on secularism. It asks you to identify the specific Indian model.
The options contrast the Western model, which is total separation, where church and state do not interact at all, with the unique Indian model.
Option C says the state can intervene to ensure equality and reform.
That is the principal distance model. The Indian state does actively intervene in religion. We ban triple talaq. We forcefully open temples to all castes. We legally manage large religious endowments. We are not blind to religion. We intervene specifically to fix social evils operating within religion. That is unique to Indian secularism and is what the question is getting at.
Let's move to section 3 now. Economy. This block is described as application heavy.
Economy is where engineering and math students usually score very high because it is highly formulaic.
Question 136 asks for the false statement regarding GDP and NDP.
Okay, let's visualize the formula. NDP is net domestic product. In economics, the word net almost always means gross minus depreciation.
Depreciation being the wear and tear on machinery, buildings, infrastructure. Like if I drive a brand new car off the lot, its net value is instantly lower than the gross price because of wear and tear.
Exactly right. You subtract the loss of value. Now look at statement A. It says, to estimate NDP depreciation is ADD to GDP.
Added. That makes absolutely no mathematical sense.
Right. Adding depreciation would inflate the value, not net it out. So statement A is factually false, which makes it the correct answer to the question.
Question 150 is about disinvestment. This is a buzzword we hear in literally every single budget speech.
It is a very simple definition question. Option A defines it as selling government shares to the private sector.
Why do they ask such simple questions this late in the paper?
To check if you actually know the precise difference between disinvestment, which is just selling a small chunk privatization, which is selling majority control, and strategic sale, which involves transferring management. But at a prelims level, option A is the clean, broad definition they want.
Question 143, the money market.
The money market is the financial market for short-term funds, anything less than a year. We are talking treasury bills, commercial paper, things like that.
Statement 2 says the RBI uses it for liquidity adjustment.
Yes. The LAF, or Liquidity Adjustment Facility, which includes the repo rate and reverse repo rate, essentially operates through these money market mechanisms to tightly control exactly how much cash is flowing in the banking system on a day-to-day basis.
Let's step back into the past now. Section 4, History, Art, and Culture.
Here, the examiner is testing your ability to connect ancient dry texts to actual living social structures.
Question 112 and 140 deal heavily with Vedic times. Question 112 asks about the specific term Rajanya.
In the early Rig Veda, society was primarily tribal. The Rajan or Rajanya wasn't a king in the modern sense, but the warrior or the leader of the ruling class.
And question 140 asks about early institutions, Vedanta, Sava, and Samiti.
This is a complex matching question. The trap here is understanding the chronological evolution of these bodies. Vedanta is the oldest known folk assembly, and crucially, it had both men and women participating. Sava was a smaller assembly of elders or elites. Samiti was the larger general folk assembly.
The question also throws in the term Vaji as an option.
Vaji wasn't an assembly at all. It was a sangha, or a confederacy of clans like the Lichavis, in the much later Mahajanapada period. It had its capital at Vaishali. It is a really important historical example of an early republic in India distinct from the absolute monarchies of the time. So matching Vaji to a Vedic assembly is the trap.
Got it. Question 133 is about the Harappan script.
The eternal historical mystery. Statement 1 here says it is linked to the Greek language.
Greek? That sounds historically impossible.
It is chronologically impossible and linguistically completely baseless. The Indus Valley civilization peaked around 2500 BCE, which long predates the classical Greek script. And more importantly, we haven't deciphered the Harappan script yet. So claiming any definitive link to any language is a false association trap.
Statement 2 discusses the actual writing style. Bostrafidon.
Yes, it's a great word. Bostrafidon means writing from right to left on the first line and then left to right on the next line, like an ox plowing a field back and forth. That is the widely accepted theory for how the Harappan script was written.
Question 147 asks about the core philosophical contribution of Jain philosophy.
Syadvada, the theory of maybe or many-sidedness.
Can you explain that in plain English for someone who hasn't studied philosophy?
It basically says that truth is incredibly complex and depends entirely on your point of view. It's the old story of the blind men and the elephant. Maybe it is a pot from this angle, maybe it is just clay from that angle. No single dogmatic view is the whole absolute truth. It is a beautiful doctrine of intellectual tolerance. If you see the terms Syadvada or Anekantavada on the paper, the answer is always Jainism.
Moving to Section 5, which is Science and Technology. We touched on GPS earlier, but let's look at question 131, Missile Technology.
This question is riddled with what I call extreme pessimism options.
I noticed that. Option A says India uses only imported components and has NO indigenous engine development. Option D says India imports all missile systems and has NO local R&D.
If you are an Indian citizen living in the 21st century, you know about Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, you know about the IGMDP, the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program, you know the names Prithvi, Agni, Akash.
The BrahMos, of course.
Exactly. While we do import some specific sensors or collaborate like we do with Russia for the BrahMos cruise missile, saying we have absolutely no R&D is absurdly false. The correct view is option C, India has strong indigenous capabilities and is actively working on next-gen hypersonic tech.
Question 152. Bio-toilets. You see these on Indian Railways trains all the time now.
The DRDO developed these specifically for the railways. The whole key to the technology is the bacteria used.
Statement C claims they require aerobic bacteria, meaning bacteria that need oxygen to survive.
That is the trap right there. Think about the physical design. These toilets feed into sealed metal tanks under the train. There is virtually no free air inside. They use an anaerobic bacterial inoculum, which is actually a cow dung-based culture developed in Antarctica that eats the human waste without needing any oxygen. If you put aerobic bacteria in there, they would just suffocate and die.
So anaerobic is the absolute key word here.
Always. Anaerobic digestion.
We also have question 151 regarding migration trends in India. This one actually really surprised me when I read the notes.
Yes. The demographic trend of internal migration.
The question asks to order the migration streams by sheer volume. Rural to urban. Urban to urban.
Right. The natural instinct for anyone reading the news is to think, everyone is moving to the big cities for jobs, so rural to urban must obviously be number one.
Is it not?
Not even close. The biggest migration stream in India by a massive margin is rural to rural.
Really? Why is that?
Marriage. In India, traditionally, women migrate to their husband's village after marriage. The national census rigorously counts this change of residence as migration. Since the rural population is so huge, this marriage migration completely dwarfs the economic migration of men moving to cities. So rural to rural is first. Rural to urban is usually second or sometimes even third, depending on the specific census data slice used.
That is a massive demographic blind spot for most students. We focus so much on urbanization and economics that we completely forget the underlying social fabric of the country.
It is a perfect example of data versus perception. The examiner tests your perception against the hard data.
Well, we have thoroughly covered the questions. Now let's zoom out. We're entering Section 6, the complete paper declassification. We have looked at all 152 questions over these 3 deep dive sessions. What is your final verdict on the 2026 paper?
My verdict is that this paper marks the absolute death of the one-liner factual question. You cannot just memorize the capital of X is Y anymore. You need to deeply understand interconnected systems.
We saw really high weightage in environment with 11 questions and maths and reasoning with 13 questions.
The maths and reasoning block is the silent killer of this paper. 13 questions. If you are weak in math and you try to solve them sequentially one by one in the middle of the exam, you will easily burn up 40 minutes and tank your whole paper.
That brings us perfectly to the strategy framework. How should a learner manage this intense time pressure?
I strongly recommend what I call the round system.
How does that work?
In round 1, you go through all 152 questions fast. You solve only the absolute sitters, like the coral reefs and disinvestment questions we discussed. You skip the calculative maths and the brutal bouncers entirely. Just leave them blank.
So you secure the easy marks first.
Exactly. Then in round 2, you come back for the maths and logic puzzles when you aren't panicking about missing easy questions. And finally, round 3 is purely for intelligent guessing on the doubtful ones, where you can eliminate 2 options.
So let's talk about that intelligent guessing.
Yeah.
We saw it in action today with the ISA question.
It is entirely about updating your mental models. First, you eliminate extremes. Words like completely abolish only never. As we saw, they were false in the property right question and the missile question.
Right.
Second, you must check the current status of your static knowledge. The ISA trap showed us that international bodies evolve their rules. Don't rely on 5-year-old textbook data for a dynamic organization.
And the third rule?
Intent over text. Especially in polity, you have to ask, why does this provision exist, like the vice president question? The intent to have a neutral umpire usually points straight to the correct answer.
Okay, and what about the postgame? The performance audit.
Right.
If a listener just finished a mock test and scored abysmally low, what should they practically do?
The biggest mistake is just looking at the final score and getting depressed. You have to look at the cause of every single error.
So categorize them.
Yes, into 4 buckets. Was it a conceptual error, meaning I genuinely thought plants don't breathe in the day? If so, go reread the insert textbook. Was it a factual error? I just forgot the Darwin rock system pairs. That means you need to go drill flashcards.
What about silly mistakes?
I call those careless errors. I read NDP, but my brain calculated GDP. The fix for that isn't more reading, it's fixing your focus and sleep. And the final bucket is the over attempt. I guessed on the Harappan script question when I had absolutely no clue. For that, you need to painfully learn to control your greed.
You have a 10-day revision blueprint, mentioned the source material here. What should people do in the final stretch?
For the last 10 days, do not try to learn entirely new subjects. Sharpen the old swords. For polity, focus exclusively on major amendments like the 42nd and 44th and the emergency provisions. They always test those.
And for environment?
Climate drivers, El Nino, the ITCZ, and geographic mapping. For science, brush up on the basic properties of light and current defense tech programs.
This brings us to the very end of our mammoth analysis. We have unpacked the psychology, the hidden traps, and the grand strategy of the 2026 paper.
It's been a journey, but if I can leave the listener with one final provocative thought.
Please do.
Ask yourself this honestly. Are you preparing to be an administrator who understands complex systems, or are you just studying to be a clerk who memorizes isolated facts? Because looking at this paper, the examiner has already made their choice. They are actively weeding out the clerks. The paper has evolved dramatically. Your preparation simply has to evolve with it.
Mental stamina and systemic understanding are just as important as the syllabus itself.
Absolutely. Read the intent, not just the text on the page.
And for those of you who want to see this analysis visually or dive even deeper into these specific questions, the source material highly recommends subscribing to the Gaurav for India YouTube channel. They seem to have the really detailed visual breakdown of everything we have been discussing today.
Yeah, I highly recommend it for the visual breakdown of these elimination strategies. Seeing it on screen really helps lock it in.
Well, stay tuned, stay disciplined, and good luck with the final prep. We will see you on the other side of the prelims.
All the absolute best to you. Keep your head in the game. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. And if you are listening to this right now, you aren't just looking for a simple answer key. You are looking for an edge. We're really in the thick of it today. We've gone through the early stages, we navigated the mid-game, and now we are finally tackling the beast. We are entering the final high-pressure segment of the GPSC prelims paper. That is questions 153 to 200.
That's right, and I want to be very clear right from the jump here. This is not just about checking a box or finding out if A or B was the correct option. I mean, anybody can just look up an answer key online. What we are doing today is a strategic dominance training session. We're going to completely deconstruct the examiner's mindset. We need to look at the traps they lay in this final quarter and figure out how you can actually master the full paper.
I really love that term, strategic dominance, because let's be honest with ourselves. By the time you hit question 153 in that exam hall, your brain feels like absolute mush. You've been sitting there for hours, the fatigue is completely real, you've already made 150 intense decisions.
Yeah, it's what we call the final quarter phenomenon. If you look at sports, games are usually won or lost in the fourth quarter. In the GPSC prelims, this is exactly where decision fatigue sets in. Your brain just stops analyzing and it starts reacting. It's a documented physiological response. You see a keyword, you immediately jump to a conclusion, and you mark the wrong circle just to get that quick dopamine hit of finishing the task.
So the brain just wants to get it over with. It essentially prioritizes closure over accuracy.
Exactly. The brain craves closure. It just wants to rush out of the room. But this is exactly where accuracy drops off a cliff for most people. The difference between a candidate who actually clears the cutoff and one who has to wait another entire year is almost always found in these last 48 questions. We really need to cultivate what I call the finisher attitude.
The finisher attitude, I like that a lot. But what does that actually look like in practice for the person taking the test?
Well, it's about disciplined guessing versus panic marking. You have to force yourself to slow down just enough to spot the traps. And if we look at this specific set of questions today, 153 to 200, it is very heavy on landmark judgments, intricate environmental concepts, and some really tricky economic nuances. If you're just running on autopilot here, you will get absolutely slaughtered. Our source material for this breakdown is drawn heavily from the Gaurav-Chauhan notes, which really emphasize this kind of pattern recognition.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have a massive amount of ground to cover today, so we are going to break this down logically, segment by segment. We aren't just reading the paper, we're decoding the underlying logic. So we are going to follow a very specific flow for every single question. We'll read it, identify the core concept, eliminate the garbage options, spot the deliberate trap, and then expand on the knowledge layer. Let's start with the money. Segment A, which is economy and trade.
Sounds good. Let's dive right in.
Starting with question 153, this one is about free trade ports, or FTPs. The question asks us to consider a couple of statements about liberalizing customs duties and a supposed WTO connection.
Right. So step one is concept identification. What actually is a free trade port? Basically, it's a designated zone where goods can land, be handled, manufactured, and then re-exported without the heavy intervention of domestic customs authorities. Now, Statement 1 talks about exactly this concept. It says FTPs are designed to boost trade and logistics by liberalizing customs duties, creating an integration with global supply chains. This is conceptually rock solid. That's exactly what an FTP does. It reduces trade friction.
It's kind of like a VIP fast lane for international goods.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But then you have to look at Statement 2. This is the trap. It claims that all FTPs operate under a single global statute that is administered directly by the WTO.
A single global statute for every free trade port in the entire world, administered by the World Trade Organization. I mean, that sounds incredibly ambitious.
And it is entirely incorrect. This is where your elimination logic kicks in. The WTO provides a broad framework for global trade rules, like general tariffs and dispute mechanisms. But it absolutely does not micromanage the specific operational statutes of every single free trade port in every sovereign nation. That is way too broad of a statement. FTPs are governed by domestic laws that just happen to exist within the framework of international agreements. There is no monolithic WTO law running them all.
So statement 1 is the winner there. The elimination tactic here is to always beware of statements that imply a massive one-size-fits-all global law for what is essentially domestic infrastructure.
Exactly. National sovereignty still exists. You have to remember that. Moving on to question 160. This is about the blue economy.
Yeah, I feel like I hear this term absolutely everywhere lately. Sustainable ocean resources. It's a major buzzword.
It is definitely a buzzword, but you have to know the precise definition for the exam. Statement 1 says it focuses on the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth and livelihoods. That is the standard accepted definition used by the World Bank. Statement 2 lists examples like fisheries, renewable energy, and tourism. All of that is perfectly good.
But here comes the trap in Statement 3.
Right, the exclusion trap. Statement 3 claims that the term blue economy refers only to conservation efforts and explicitly excludes commercial activity.
That seems totally counterintuitive. I mean, it has the word economy right there in the name.
Exactly. And this is where you just use basic semantic logic. If it excluded commercial activity, it would be called blue conservation or maybe marine protectionism. The entire point of the blue economy concept is balancing economic growth with ocean health. It doesn't choose one over the other. It integrates both of them. So statement 3 is definitively false.
Nice. Let's jump to question 164. Globalization. We have to identify what actually constitutes globalization from a list of actions. Lowering tariffs? Check. Removing quotas? Check.
Foreign direct investment flow? Check. That's simply capital moving across international borders. But then you look at option D, disinvestment or divestment of public sector undertakings.
Selling off government-owned companies? Like what happened with Air India?
Exactly. But that is a domestic economic reform. It's privatization. Now, a student might think, well, doesn't privatization often happen alongside globalization? Yes, it does. Do they often appear in the exact same paragraph in an economics textbook? Yes. But is selling a government company inherently the same thing as globalization? No. That is just an internal change of ownership structure. Globalization is strictly about the cross-border flow of goods, services, capital, and people. Selling a PSU is purely a domestic fiscal policy decision.
Got it. It's about the border, not the ownership structure per se.
Okay, question 171, balance of payments, the BBOP. We want to improve our BBOP situation. The question asks what action is unlikely to help. We have options like devaluation of the rupee. Does that help? Yes, because it instantly makes our exports cheaper for other countries and makes imports more expensive for us. Import substitution. Yes, that means making things at home instead of buying them from abroad, which saves foreign exchange.
So what's the odd one out here?
The option about imposing high duties on development or exports. Think about the core logic there. If you tax your own exports heavily, you kill your competitiveness in the global market. You will earn less foreign exchange. That directly hurts your balance of payments. It's basic logic. You don't shoot your own exporters in the foot if your goal is to fix a Bobby crisis.
Sound advice for literally any autonomy. All right, let's shift gears completely. We are moving into what you call the factual minefield. Segment B, history and culture. Why do you always call this section a minefield?
Because unlike the conceptual questions in economy, where you can reason your way out, history questions in this paper are strictly binary. You either know the fact or you don't. And the examiner absolutely loves to swap names around. All the logic in the world cannot save you if you simply don't know the specific name of the king or the reformer.
Let's look at question 154 then, the Cripps mission of 1942. Obviously a pivotal moment. The question asks, who actually accepted it?
This is a classic trap.
Yeah.
Students often sit there and think, well, I know it failed overall, but maybe one of the parties agreed to it initially. The statement suggests that Congress accepted it, but the Muslim League rejected it, or vice versa.
But the historical reality?
The reality is that both major parties rejected it completely. It was a total, absolute failure. Congress wanted full independence, Purna Swaraj, right then and there. Gandhi famously called it a post-dated check on a crashing bank. The League rejected it for a different reason, because it didn't explicitly grant the creation of Pakistan. It was a lose-lose proposal for the British.
So if you are reading the options and you see a statement saying Congress accepted the Cripps mission, you eliminate it immediately.
Correct. No hesitation. Now, let's look at question 161. British officials. We are given Cornwallis, Sir William Jones, and John Shore.
This feels like one of those match the column nightmares.
It is entirely about associating the historical person with their specific administrative reform. Cornwallis is around 1785, famously associated with the permanent settlement in Bengal. But the question is asking about specific roles. Sir William Jones, he was a jurist, a scholar, the guy who essentially found the linguistic link between Sanskrit and Latin. So judicial advisor, that is very plausible. John Shore, he was the absolute expert on revenue.
So the strategy here is matching the broad domain to the person. Shore equals revenue, Jones equals law and culture, Cornwallis equals administration and settlement.
Exactly. The trap is that they will mix up Shore and Jones. If you fall for that swap, you lose the marks instantly.
Let's look at question 168. Social reform movements. Who founded the Dev Samaj?
This is a pure information gap question. A lot of students confuse it with the Brahma Samaj or the Arya Samaj because they sound similar. Dev Samaj was founded by Shiv Narayan Agnihotri.
Agnihotri, got it. Not Roy, not Saraswati. Agnihotri.
Right. And while we are on the topic of reforms, question 175 asks for the chronological order. You have to arrange Brahma Samaj, Arya Samaj, Prathana Samaj, and Dev Samaj in a timeline.
This is where having that rough historical timeline in your head really matters.
You don't even need the exact years for all of them, but you absolutely need the decades. Brahma Samaj is early. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, 1828. That has to be your anchor. That is basically the start of the Indian Renaissance. Arya Samaj is much later, 1875. Prathana Samaj is 1867. Dev Samaj is 1887.
So Brahmo is clearly the first, and Dev Samaj is the last. That alone anchors your options.
Precision is the key. Find the first and the last, and usually in these multiple choice formats, the incorrect options just eliminate themselves.
Moving over to culture. Question 182, we have statements about the Calico Museum in Ahmedabad and the Ellora Kailash Temple.
The Calico Museum is indeed associated with the Sarabhai family, specifically Gautam Sarabhai. That statement is usually given correctly as a free D. But look closely at the Kailash Temple statement. It says the temple was built by Krishna III.
Krishna III? I mean, it sounds highly plausible. It's definitely a Rashtrakuta dynasty name.
It is a Rashtrakuta name, but it is the wrong king trap. The Kailash Temple, that massive, magnificent monolith, was actually built by Krishna I.
The first, not the third. That is a really brutal detail to test on.
It is brutal, but that is exactly the difference between a generalist and a specialist in this exam. You have to catch that Roman numeral.
And what about question 189? Foreign travelers, we have to match Niccolo Conti, Domingos Pais, and Ibn Battuta.
Match them to their origins. Niccolo Conti was Italian. Domingos Pais was Portuguese. He famously visited the Vijayanagar Empire. Ibn Battuta was Moroccan. The strategy here is to use the one you are absolutely sure of. Usually Ibn Battuta is the most famous for students. If you know he is Moroccan, you look at the options and you can almost always eliminate two of them immediately.
Use the sure shot to kill the wrong options. I like that. Okay, let's move to the heavyweight division. Segment C, polity and constitution.
This is the conceptual core of the paper. This is where you cannot just rely on memorization. You must actually understand the soul of the Constitution.
Let's start with question 155. Administrative tribunals, why do we even have them?
The question asks for the constitutional justification. Are they created to eventually replace all normal courts? No. Are they there to abolish the power of judicial review? Absolutely not.
So what is their actual purpose?
Specialization. Regular courts are incredibly overburdened, and judges may not always have the deep technical expertise required for very specific administrative or environmental disputes. Tribunals are created to handle these complex technical disputes with specialized knowledge, which reduces the massive burden on the traditional judiciary.
So if an option says something like, they exist to bypass the high court entirely, that is a massive red flag.
Yes. There are supplementary bodies. They are not a total replacement of the judicial system. Judicial review by higher courts always remains.
Question 162, the welfare state.
This directly links to the Directive Principles of State Policy, the DPSP. The statement asks if Article 41 makes welfare schemes like MG and RE-GA a fundamental right.
Is the right to work considered a fundamental right in India?
No, it is not. Article 41 is a directive principle. That means it is non-justiciable. You cannot just walk into the Supreme Court and demand a job from the government as a fundamental right directly under Article 41. MG and RE-GA is a legal right that is conferred by a specific statute passed by Parliament, not a constitutional fundamental right.
That is a very crucial distinction for students to make, a legal right versus a fundamental right.
Exactly. And speaking of very tricky legal nuances, let's look at questions 169 and 183. They both touch on international law and Article 253.
This feels like a very high-level concept. How exactly does India handle international treaties?
India follows a dualist model. This means that an international treaty does not automatically become domestic law just because the Prime Minister or the President signed it abroad. Parliament must pass a specific domestic law to actually implement it inside the country.
So if the United Nations passes some resolution, it doesn't just magically apply to me living in Gujarat.
Correct. It has no domestic force until Parliament acts. And here is the immense power of Article 253. It gives Parliament the overriding power to make laws on absolutely any subject, even those on the state list, if it is necessary to implement an international treaty.
That is quite a superpower for the center.
It's a massive centralization of power for treaty obligations. But the trap in the exam is usually a statement saying international treaties are automatically enforceable upon signature. That is always false for a dualist state like India.
Question 174, TRAI, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India.
Regulatory bodies are always a favorite topic for the GPSC. The question asks about its specific powers. Does TRAI regulate tariffs? Yes. Does it ensure quality of service for consumers? Yes.
But are its recommendations strictly binding on the central government?
Ah, that is the exact nuance they test. Regarding major policy like spectrum management and licensing, TRAI's role is purely recommendatory. The government can, and sometimes does, completely reject its recommendations. It is not binding. So if a statement says the government must accept TRAI's spectrum pricing, that is a false statement. The sovereign executive is always above the statutory regulator.
Question 176, accountability of the executive. How do we practically hold the government responsible?
There are many theoretical ways, but the question is looking for the specific day-to-day parliamentary tool. The correct answer is ministers answering parliamentary questions.
You mean the question hour?
Yes. When a cabinet minister is forced to stand up on the floor of the Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha and answer a direct query from an MP, that is the very essence of accountability. It forces transparency on the executive branch.
Let's move to question 190, rule of law.
We all know it means equality before law. But does it mean every single person is treated exactly the same in every scenario? No. Reasonable classification is constitutionally allowed. For instance, you can tax a billionaire at a higher rate than someone living in poverty. That isn't considered a violation of the rule of law. It's what the courts call intelligible differentia.
So outright discrimination is bad, but classification is perfectly okay as long as it's reasonable and logical.
Exactly. Arbitrary discrimination is banned by the Constitution. Reasonable classification to achieve a welfare goal is totally constitutional.
Question 195, environment and the Constitution.
This one has a really nasty trap hidden in it. The statement claims the National Green Tribunal, the NGT, is a constitutional body.
I mean, it sounds important enough to be in the Constitution.
And that is exactly how they get you. The Election Commission is a constitutional body. The UPSC is a constitutional body. The NGT is a statutory body. It was created by an act of Parliament, specifically the NGT Act of 2010. It is not written anywhere in the original Constitution.
Statutory versus constitutional. You really have to know the exact origin of these bodies. And finally, for this polity section, question 198. The K.S. Puttaswamy case.
The famous privacy judgment. A massive landmark case. The Supreme Court ruled that the right to privacy is a fundamental right protected under Article 21.
Is that right absolute?
Trap analysis time. Statement 3 claims privacy is absolute and cannot be restricted by the state. That is false. No fundamental right in India is absolute. Reasonable restrictions always apply things like national security, public order, prevention of crime. If the option says a right is absolute, you can almost always eliminate it blindly.
The word absolute is almost always a wrong answer in polity questions, isn't it?
Almost always. It's a massive red flag.
Okay, let's cleanse the palate a bit with some math and reasoning. Segment D. This is all about speed and precision. Let's look at question 156. Directions.
Right, the classic Suresh and Ramesh problem. Suresh goes east 45 meters, takes a right for 10 meters, another right for 15 meters, and a final right for 50 meters.
I can kind of visualize the zigzag pattern in my head.
Don't just visualize it, draw it. Do it quickly on the rough sheet. The trick here is usually calculating the final displacement, not the total distance walked. He went east 45, then eventually came back right 1, which is actually west if you track the turns for 15 meters. You have to calculate the net straight line distance from the original starting point. It's simple geometry, usually forming a right-angle triangle where you use the Pythagoras theorem, or sometimes just a straight subtraction on a single axis.
Questions 163 and 170 are both ranking questions.
Memorizing the formulas is your best friend here. For Q163, Sunil is 15th from the left and 17th from the right. The standard formula for total people is left plus right minus 1.
Why do we subtract the 1?
Because you counted Sunil twice. You counted him once when you scanned from the left and once when you scanned from the right. So it's 15 plus 17, which is 32, minus 1 equals 31.
Makes sense. And Q170. A student is ranked 77 from the top in a class of 200 students. We need the rank from the bottom.
The formula for rank from the bottom is total minus top rank plus 1. So 200 minus 77 plus 1. That gives you exactly 124.
And why do we do a plus 1 this time?
Because when you subtracted the 77 students, you actually removed the person himself from the group. You have to mathematically add him back in to find his specific position.
Got it. Minus 1 when finding the total, plus 1 when finding the position. Question 177, blood relations. The prompt is, your father-in-law is my father-in-law's father-in-law.
This always sounds like a ridiculous riddle from a fantasy movie. The strategy here is generation breakdown. Don't try to solve the whole sentence in one go. You'll just confuse yourself. Break it down. Start with my father-in-law's father-in-law. Who is that functionally? That's the grandfather-in-law. Then you connect that back to the first part, your father-in-law. Take it step by step, generation by generation on paper.
And Q184, the calendar problem.
It says the third Saturday of the month is the 16th. Find the date of the fourth Thursday. Again, do not guess. If the 16th is a Saturday, then the 17th is Sunday, the 18th is Monday, and so on. Just count forward. Accuracy completely beats speed in these calendar questions.
Moving on to segment E, geography and environment. Question 158, languages.
It's about the Indo-Aryan language family. The distribution is mainly in North, West, and Central India. The reason given is historical migration from Central Asia. This is an assertion-reason format question. Usually both statements are historically true, and the migration history is indeed the correct explanation for the modern geographic distribution of these languages.
Question 159. The Jyotigram Yojana. This is a very specific Gujarat state scheme.
The broad goal is 247 power to villages, but the technical concept they test here is feeder separation. They physically separated the agricultural power lines from the residential and commercial ones. This ensures farmers get high-quality power when they actually need it for irrigation, while rural homes get continuous power 247.
Questions 165 and 192, Gujarat demographics.
You really need to know the state map intimately. For population density, cities like Surat and Ahmedabad are at the absolute top. For scheduled tribe population, question 192, you have to look at the eastern belt, stretching all the way from Ambaji down to Umargam. Dang's district is the one with the highest percentage of tribal population relative to its total size.
Question 167, renewable energy.
You have to watch out for the only solar trap here. A statement might confidently claim that India's renewable capacity is driven only by solar power, with absolutely no wind contribution. That is totally false. States like Gujarat and Tamil Nadu are massive wind energy giants. Wind makes up a highly significant portion of the energy mix.
Question 172, industry location. The Chota and Nagpur Plateau. Why is the heavy steel industry concentrated there?
It's certainly not because of cheap labor. It's not because it's close to the consumer market. It is entirely about the raw material. Iron ore and coking coal are incredibly heavy and bulky. You really don't want to transport them across the country, so you build a factory right on top of the mine. In economic geography, this is known as the weight-losing raw material theory.
Question 179, crop acreage specifically in Gujarat.
This is what I call a bouncer question. You have to order cotton, groundnut bajra, and maize by their total sown area.
That requires some very specific data retention.
It does, but you can use logic.
Mm-hmm.
Cotton is usually king in Gujarat's agriculture. Groundnut is the queen. So those two are almost always at the top of the list. If you just know that cotton is number one, you can immediately eliminate any options that start with bajra or maize.
Question 180, the Miyawaki method.
This is a technique for urban afforestation. You take a very small urban space, use purely native species, and plant them incredibly dense. It grows roughly 10 times faster than a normal forest. It's becoming very popular in major cities like Ahmedabad and Surat to create microforests.
Question 186, strategic choke points.
We're looking at the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, and the Strait of Malacca. The question usually asks about their geographic impact. Suez connects the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. Panama connects the Atlantic directly to the Pacific. Malacca connects the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. You simply have to know which bodies of water these choke points bridge.
Question 199, COP28.
Pure current affairs. It was held recently in Dubai, UAE. But the big takeaway, they will test. The Loss and Damage Fund was finally operationalized. If you see a statement claiming the fund was rejected or postponed, that is definitively false. Keep your impartiality here. You just need to know the outcome, not the politics surrounding it.
And Q200, vegetation types.
This compares tropical evergreen forests with thorny bushes.
What's the elimination logic here?
Statement 1 might claim that evergreen forests exist in areas with less than 100 centimeters of rainfall. Well, it's practically a desert. Evergreen forests need massive rainfall, well over 200 centimeters. Statement 2 says Rajasthan has thorny bushes primarily due to its arid climate. That is obviously true, so statement 1 is false, statement 2 is true.
We are in the final stretch of the paper now. Segment F Sci-Tech and Modern Economy. Let's hit these fairly quickly. Q166, Terminator genes.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie, but it's a real agricultural technology. Basically, it creates sterile seeds. This means farmers cannot save seeds from their harvest to replant the next season. They are forced to buy brand new seeds from the corporation every single year. Again, purely reporting the facts here, it is a highly controversial practice globally.
Q173, Plasma Research.
The Institute for Plasma Research is located in Gandhinagar. The core concept is that plasma is considered the fourth state of matter. You have solid, liquid, gas, and then plasma.
Q181, ODOP, One District, One Product.
This is essentially a massive branding exercise. A question might ask if it allows multiple, totally unrelated products to be promoted per district. While some minor flexibility might exist, the core philosophy is focusing on one unique identifier per district to create a strong export brand and specialization.
Q185, FDI versus FI.
The easiest way to remember this, FDI is a marriage. FI has just a casual date.
Oh, I like that analogy. Explain that a bit more.
FDI, foreign direct investment, is long-term. It's a company building physical factories, bringing in new technology and management. It stays put. FII, foreign institutional investment, is just foreign entities buying local stocks and bonds. If the stock market dips or there is a global panic, they sell immediately and leave. FII is what economists call hot money. It is far less stable than FDI.
Q187, the AI hierarchy.
Time to visualize again. Imagine a really big circle, and let's label that entire circle artificial intelligence. Inside that big circle, draw a smaller one called machine learning. And inside that machine learning circle, draw an even tinier circle called deep learning. Deep learning is a subset of ML, which is itself a subset of AI.
Q188, Ease of Doing Business Index.
Here is a massive trap. Treating outdated knowledge as current facts. The World Bank actually discontinued this specific report entirely due to some severe data irregularities a few years ago. If an exam question asks you for India's 2025 rank on this index, it's a trick. There is no rank because the report doesn't exist anymore.
Q191, Factors of Production. Is the natural fertility of land considered capital?
No, it is not. In classical economics, land is its own distinct factor of production. Rain and soil fertility are natural endowments. Capital refers specifically to man-made aids to production, things like tractors, factories, and tools.
Q193, Rare earth elements. Are they actually rare?
Actually, no. They are quite abundant in the Earth's crust. They're called rare, not because they are scarce, but because they're incredibly difficult, highly polluting, and costly to extract and purify. They don't typically appear in rich, concentrated veins the way gold or silver does.
Q194, Asian Development Bank, the ADB.
HQ is in Manila. A common trap is the voting structure. Is it one country, one vote like the UN General Assembly? No. Voting power is strictly weighted by financial shareholding. Countries like Japan and the USA hold the biggest financial shares, so they possess the most voting power.
Q196, market structures, specifically monopolistic competition.
This is a very specific economic setup. It means there are many sellers in the market, there is free entry and exit, but crucially, the products are differentiated. They are close substitutes, but not completely identical. Think of the market for toothpaste or shampoo.
Q197, PM Gati Shakti.
This is the National Master Plan. The core concept is integrated planning for multimodal infrastructure. The ultimate goal is breaking down the silos between railways, roads, and ports to drastically lower the country's logistics costs.
Q. All right, that is the complete deconstruction. We have torn apart the final 48 questions, but we aren't done yet. We need to look at the entire picture. Let's move to part 2. Complete paper master analysis.
Right, if you step back and look at the paper from question 1 all the way to 200, some very clear patterns emerge.
What's the overall subject distribution look like?
Quality is highly conceptual this year. It's not just rote memorization of articles, it's testing your understanding of Supreme Court judgments and the fundamental nature of rights. Economy is a very deliberate mix of static theory, like inflation dynamics, and dynamic current affairs, like new schemes and indices. History, well, as we said, history is the killer section. It is unapologetically factual. If you don't know the specific king or the exact traveler, you are just guessing in the dark.
And what about the math section?
Math is the absolute game changer. It is calculative, yes, but it is the only section in the entire paper where you can be 100% sure of your answer. If your calculation says the answer is 31, it is 31. There is no ambiguity, no alternative interpretations.
We talked a lot about traps today. What are the recurring trap patterns you saw spread across the whole paper?
I'd say there are 3 big ones you have to watch out for. First is the only and absolute trap. Statements saying privacy is absolute, or we rely only on solar energy. These are almost always factually false. Second is the name swap trap, saying Krishna III built a temple instead of Krishna I, or saying Cornwallis did the revenue reform instead of John Shore. Third is the definition exclusion trap, like that blue economy question, making a statement that a broad, inclusive term actually excludes one of its major components.
Identifying these patterns is honestly half the battle. Now, let's talk real strategy. Part 3. The strategic performance blueprint. Based on the Gaurav Chauhan notes, you advocate for a specific 3-block strategy for the final study days.
Yes. You absolutely cannot just study randomly in the final 2 weeks. You need a biological rhythm. Block 1 is your morning session, roughly 3 hours. Your mind is fresh. This is when you tackle the heavy concepts, polity judgments, complex economic theories. You should be constantly asking yourself why. Why was this specific amendment passed? Block 2 is the afternoon, maybe 2 hours. This is the post-lunch slump. Your brain is tired. Do not read heavy text here. Do active work to fight sleep. Solve math and reasoning problems. Do map work with an atlas. Do something physical with your hands. Block 3 is the evening, another 2 hours. Use this for current affairs and light, repetitive revision.
And how should a student handle the final weekend before the exam?
Saturday must be for pure revision only. Absolutely no new topics. If you haven't learned a concept by Friday night, do not try to cram it into your head on Saturday. You will just induce panic. Sunday is your mock test day. But more importantly, it is for analysis. Sit down and identify exactly where you fell for the specific traps we just spent an hour discussing.
That brings us perfectly to part 4, the error audit. How do we actually fix our mistakes once we find them?
You have to categorize your errors ruthlessly. Don't just look at a red mark and say, oh, I got it wrong. You must ask why you got it wrong. Was it a conceptual error? Like, I genuinely didn't understand Article 253. If so, you must go back to the foundational books. Was it an information gap? Like, I had literally never heard of the Dev Samaj before. If so, just add that fact to your short notes. Or was it a careless trap error? Like, I knew the concept, but I completely missed the word not in the question. This is the worst kind of error. You had the knowledge, but you essentially gave the marks away. Fixing this requires dedicated focus training and slowing down your reading speed.
This is a truly comprehensive roadmap. Before we finally sign off today, let's do a grand strategic recap. What are the top 5 high-yield themes a student absolutely must own before walking into that exam hall?
Number 1, constitutional judgments. Things like the privacy ruling and the basic structure doctrine. Number 2, macroeconomics. You must understand inflation dynamics, the balance of payments, and major global indices. Number 3, climate politics. Know the outcomes of COP summits, the various climate funds, and renewable energy targets. Number 4, ancient art and culture. Focus heavily on temple architecture, foreign travelers, and the broad chronology of empires. And number 5, emerging tech. Understand the basic structures of AI, green energy initiatives, and space technology.
Well, there you have it. We have taken the entire paper apart, question by painstaking question. You now have the blueprint. You understand the psychology of the final quarter.
But remember, all this knowledge is completely useless without strict application. You need to start using that 3 o'clock strategy starting tomorrow morning.
And if you want more of this highly targeted, exam-oriented content, make sure to subscribe to the Gaurav for India YouTube channel. The difference between a struggling candidate and a future officer is very often just having the discipline to avoid these easy traps.
Stay disciplined out there.
Good luck with your preparation. We will see you all in the next deep dive.